Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polk County Public Schools School Board Work Session for May 11th, 2021. And at this time, I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Byrd to conduct our work session for today. Mrs. Byrd?
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to the work session today. The first item we have on the agenda for you today, and I see Mr. Butler's already present, is the Code of Student Conduct. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Today I'm bringing forward the 2021-2022 Code of Student Conduct for your review. As you know, according to board policy, we must review this yearly and then vote to accept it again at a later date. The changes this year in the Code of Conduct were very minimal. There were no state statute changes, and the only changes that we had to make are listed on your change and reason for change sheet, and those were all technology policies, and those were already approved by you at former board meetings this year. And I have given you a copy with red tabs on it for marking those changes. If you want me to read them, I can.
Are there any questions? Ms. Miller?
I just have a quick question, Mr. Butler. The community committee, or the committee that you have to review our code of conduct, I know COVID kept those people from meeting. Is that something that's going to start, are they meeting virtually?
We met via email
Okay.
and sent out requests for any changes. I thought I included the list, but I do have a copy of the list here I can give you, and it lets you know what their title is, if they're a community member, a grandparent, parent, principal, assistant principals, and so forth. But yes, we went over email to do that this year with the corresponding group. If anyone dropped off last year, we added someone of like kind to that.
Our board members, are we given the opportunity to assign people to that committee or give information or suggestions to you for that committee?
Yes, board members have in the past suggested members, and I have placed them on the committee when an opening comes up.
Is there a term limit or something for that service?
No, ma'am. We have probably, this year I think I replaced 11 or 12
okay.
because of attrition throughout the employees and through parents, their students aging out of our school system.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Fortney?
Do we send that nominee to you?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Okay.
And just let me know what position they would hold, whether it be a community member, parent, or an administrator.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Butler.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Glad to see you back. The next item coming before you, and she's coming forward, is regarding our adult lunch meal price update.
As she said, the discussion item we have today is regarding adult lunch meal prices. We've sort of neglected the adult lunch meal price since we became a non-pricing district for students. So that was the 14-15 school year. So it's time that we have a small discussion today and get your feedback on how we get that price into compliance. I have provided you with the USDA guidance on how we should be pricing adult lunch meal prices. Essentially, the formula is that the meal price should be no less than what we receive funding for student lunches. So that's a direct payment as well as the value of USDA foods that we receive. So based on that, right now, our adult meal price is $3.10. And as I stated earlier, it's been that since the 14-15 school year. And if you looked at our current funding for this current school year, we should be charging $3.84 at a minimum. So I've given you a few things. I've given you the last 5 years of reimbursement rates just so you could see sort of the average increase, because obviously as we set these prices, we have to think about each year we get an increase in funding. So the adult meal price needs to keep up with that. I've also given you some choices or some options for how we could proceed with next school year that you can vote on later, either in June or July at your pleasure. But basically, we've sort of estimated what we feel like the minimum price would be for next school year based on our estimated funding, which is released in July. So the minimum would be $395, we believe. And then we've provided just some alternate options if we didn't want to have to increase incrementally every single year as the funding were to increase. So I'm open to your feedback on that, on those options, so that we could then bring them back for a vote at a later board meeting.
Mrs. Miller?
I just have a question. With the federal program providing free lunches, so are we making money on these adult lunches? They're not part of, the food's not coming in for free, they're just being, the money's being subsidized?
Yep, our funding is entirely based on reimbursements per meal. So every month, we submit to USDA through the state agency how many meals we've served, and we get direct reimbursement specifically for the number of meals. We get no funding whatsoever for adult meals. So that is why the guidance suggests that, you're not subsidizing adult meals somehow with funding from student meals that we're getting from the government. So we're supposed to cover that cost with our price.
I just have one question that's maybe a little bit off topic. When we're doing the free federal program for all or for most students with the schools that are providing that, is there strings to what's being provided, or is it strictly dollars that are the dollars attached to what you're providing?
Yes,
lunch?
absolutely.
Okay.
So there's strict guidelines for what we have to provide, components and nutritional requirements that we have to provide with each meal. I think that's what you're asking.
Right.
Yeah, so our menu is very strictly, we have the guidelines that we have to meet, so the menus. So we get to choose what we provide
that
on
was the
those
question.
menus,
Okay.
definitely. So we have a team that looks at providing the best quality we can within our funding, but definitely we have strict nutritional requirements and components that have to be provided.
Thank you.
Mrs. Cunningham?
Okay, so you did mention that there was a recommendation, perhaps, is it, to go to the 384 or to go to the 395?
$395, because we are talking about 21-22 school year.
Okay,
But I just wanted to provide some context. Right now, our current funding, the minimum would have been $384.
I see. Had we done it for this school?
Right.
Okay, okay.
And in July, we'll get the actual reimbursement rates. I looked
Yes.
at the average, and I tried to sort of hedge the bets of what it might be.
At that
So I'm
time.
leaning towards perhaps bringing that back in July.
Yes.
Once we have the actual funding, unless someone strongly, or several of you strongly, wanted us to go above the minimum, which would mean, we wouldn't have to wait. And again, if we did that, we wouldn't necessarily have to have the same conversation every year to raise that adult meal price to keep up. This is just some options that we had.
So looking at 395, if we were by consensus to say if that's where it fell after you did the calculations, after July 1, would that be a comfortable place?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how the others feel, but I just think, do we want to revisit it in July, or how do we want to handle it?
I think we just need to settle today, 395.
Right, and be done.
And be done with it.
Everybody good?
Okay, so I'll plan to bring that to a consent agenda with that price.
That would be great.
All right,
Okay.
okay.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah,
Any
thank
questions?
you. Yes, ma'am. How many adult meals do we serve?
We did
per
go
year?
ahead and pull that when we were having these discussions. We were down a little bit this year just due to obvious reasons, so we went back to the previous school year, and we're really only serving about 775 meals a day to adults. We may be serving them other things that aren't a combo meal, but in terms of, meals, it was a little lower than I expected, actually, so.
Okay. All right. The reason I was asking is, teachers are reaching out to me, hey, do we have any opportunities for free meals or anything like that? I mean, has that even been part of any type of discussion, maybe on a rolling basis, like on Wednesdays or anything like that?
It's never something we've explored. We would have to find funding for that. It's not something we'd be allowed to provide funding through our funding sources. So it would
Yeah.
be something that we would have to explore if someone wanted to perhaps donate money for that. I'd be open to those discussions if anybody had any suggestions for who might be wanting to fund that. But, it's not something we've ever looked at before.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I have a follow-up from Mr. Allen, because you mentioned teachers with the free meals, but wouldn't you look at all staff if that's something that you did? Not just teachers, but if it was all staff?
That would certainly make sense.
Okay.
And just for a point of clarification, school nutrition staff are allowed to have an earned meal. So the staff working on the actual preparation of meals by federal law, you're allowed to provide those meals at no charge. It's part of their salary package. if you will. But yeah, I think if we were going to do it, I agree, it would be any staff working,
Thank
any
you.
adult staff.
Ms. Fortney?
And that's 775, that's our maintenance and.
Anybody that might come to a school
Yeah,
cafeteria, that's
because
our
they
daily
tend to
average.
eat, probably more than the teachers do. I don't mean it that way.
They do.
Yeah.
but- Right.
Yeah, they do. A lot of them do come and eat with us.
Are there any other questions on the adult meal price? So this one will come back to you, and I believe we gave the consensus of option 1, $3.95. So that will come back before the board.
Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The next item coming before you, as you know, session just ended, so we have Heather Jenkins and Jason Pitts coming before you to give us a budget update of what's going on. I believe there's a PowerPoint. I don't know if it's loaded or we have hard copies.
There is a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Today, Jason Pitts and I are here to discuss our current fund balance with you, our new funding that we anticipate as a result of session, our plan for the 21-22 school year, and also an update on our ESSER funding. First of all, we'd like to share with the board that based on our current projections, we are looking to end our current fiscal year with a 6.80 unassigned fund balance. I want to point out to the board that there are still several things that could change. We do have different costs that continue to come in, as this is based on our March projections. Our financials do run a little bit behind. We will continue to update the board as we go forward. I want to point out, in the PowerPoint, you can see that there are two different fund balance designations shown, and we've talked about this a little bit before. The first is our total fund balance, and that's used by different rating agencies and in different publications. That includes our non-spendable and restricted fund balance, but the piece that's important to the state that they use in our financial condition ratio is the assigned and unassigned pieces. And what that is unassigned is funding that we can use for anything. There are no restrictions on it. And assigned fund balances are for things such as projects that our superintendent does have the ability to unassign if necessary. So I just wanted to point out that difference to you all. Do you guys have any questions about our current fund balance projection? No? Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, I was trying to. I have a question that might affect overall, this prediction overall. Minutes before the work session started, the governor signed House Bill 7045, which will extend options for vouchers in private schools. It will limit what we can do with McKay. When we're projecting students, is there any way to know how many students we will lose funding for or lose in-person seats?
Excuse me, we don't know, there's no way to know the exact number. We do have a projection that's done with the rest of our FTE projections, so we have a general idea, but unfortunately, we never know the hard and fast number until we get that piece.
I just want to make, and this is somebody who I've been involved with House Bill 7045 and one of those voucher programs, and this is something that I think we could talk at a later date, but I think we need to start tracking those students. We get a lot of them back. And so if we're missing dollars and they leave and they come back and we have to remediate academics, and we have no funding to do that, like I think we need to show the data of that gap.
Yes, that's a great idea. You're absolutely right. We do pick them up in later counts at times, but there is a portion of time that they're missing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Pitts to talk about our fourth calculation compared to our conference report.
So a couple things have happened in the legislature and the DOE since we've been in front of you. That's the fourth calculation. That really is where we end the year in funding. As you know, throughout the year, the state does a total of actually 5 calculations, but the 4th is the one that we receive in May. So that's sort of where we end the year. And I want to bring your attention to really one item in that 4th calculation. And that's actually on your second page of this report. So it's the 3rd page of your presentation. At the very top of that page on the left, you'll see emergency order funding adjustment, $22 million. Does everybody see that? So that's the hold harmless amount. That is the amount that the state kept us whole. Had they not done that, we would have lost that $22 million, which is really represented in missing students in our population, because these calculations are pretty much strictly based by number of students, which is how we're funded. So that's just important to draw your attention to, because had we not received that $22 million, we would have been starting the year in a very negative position. So just within the last week and a half, the House and the Senate agreed on the conference report. Now, that's your second column in this report. And that's really, now we can begin the budgeting process. That's the first count that we start building our budget upon. And we were very happy on both the House and the Senate previous to this conference report. We're showing our student population to be about 106,000, which, yeah, so when the House and the Senate were their first conference reports, what they were proposing was built on an unweighted amount of 106,000 students. And this whole funding is based on the number of students. So we were looking at best, maybe a $2 million increase all the way down to a $10 million decrease between the House and the Senate. Once they agreed on this conference bill, they accepted our projections for students at 109,476.18. That's the very first row on that middle column. So that represented approximately 3,000 students, which we were glad to see in the report. Otherwise, we would have been starting off in a negative position again. I'm going to go through this pretty quick, and if you have questions, please stop me. So the variance column is the difference between how we are ending the year and how we're going to start the year. And our base student allocation, which we try to focus on because that's really unrestricted funds, we're going up $50 per student. And then you'll see these, all of these columns have increased, and that's primarily because of the number of students. But once you start getting into the items that are highlighted in blue, which are your turnaround supplemental services, you'll see on the left side, safe schools, those are restricted funds. So at the end of the year, we either have to give those funds back to the state or we keep them and they're counted as restricted and they do not go towards our unrestricted balance to help our fund balance. So all the items highlighted in blue are restricted funds. Right in the middle, you'll see the teacher's salary increase allocation. That has gone up about $1.9 million. Again, that's the state plan to get our teachers up to the minimum of $47,500 for a beginning salary. Not sure if anybody has any questions on this first page. Went through that pretty quick. No? Okay. So the only other item, a couple items I want to point out on the second page of this report. is at the very bottom of the conference column, so the middle column, all the way down to the bottom, you'll see required local effort. And I was very happy to be able to bring this up because, and Mr. Wilson is not here at the moment, because this is what we call the required local effort. And they did not roll it back this year. It's the first time in many years they have not rolled it back. So you can't see on this spreadsheet, but for 2021, our required local effort was 3.687. And on this conference report, the required local effort is 3.694. So we're actually going to go up in our required local effort, which is nice to see. And so on the very right column, the variance, at the very bottom, you'll see that our total funding for next year will increase by $7,700,000. However, again, that's not all unrestricted funds, but we will see a positive in our revenue for next year. If anybody have any questions on what I went over pretty quick? Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Miller?
Ms. Miller.
Lots of questions today, Jason Pitts. This might be a longer conversation. Is this where we can talk about salaries being funded ahead of time before we start the budget process, especially for our ASME workers who are working at the minimum, very minimum? We have minimum wage, and we promise them every year to try, and I think we have it. We just have to do the work in the front end.
This would be where those conversations could start, because this is the first time that we've seen what our revenue is going to be for next year. And I will say that the next couple pages of this presentation will also give you some of the expenses that we are going to see. But this is our first opportunity to really see what our revenue is.
I just, as a board member who's heard that every year and before when I sat in the audience and heard it every year, we have to do better by these people. And so I hope that's something that we can work on in this budget. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Well, basically, I'm excited about the required local effort not being rolled back. We've been talking about that for at least a decade, I believe, and it's been a long time coming. So this is funding that we weren't expecting to receive. And so going back to Ms. Miller's comments, I would imagine after you show us everything, there would be conversation to be had about increasing the appropriate staff salaries. So, I think we need to commend Wendy Dodge and others that have been advocating, looking at our legislative platform and making sure that the areas that we identified as a priority has really been pushed. So I would say kudos to everybody involved in making sure that for the first time in many, many, many years that we don't have to be concerned about the the required local effort being rolled back. So that's good news.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to go back, Ms. Miller, something you brought up earlier, and it's on this page, is in the middle, you'll see the adjustment for McKay scholarships, the adjustment for family empowerment scholarships. We recently received those final, I assume they're final, but those family empowerment scholarships went up quite a bit, and we're going to see probably an additional $4 million next year between those two scholarships, if you want to call them scholarships or vouchers.
Superintendent? Can I
Yes.
respond? And this might be something Wendy could help with, because the additional scholarship is the Gardner that was funded under a different source is now under, this is all together at this point. So there's even more dollars. Dollars follow the children, but that's where I want to track where they're going. So when they come back, and not all the time, but when we do, I hear from teachers in the classroom, especially after that third grade, where they'll leave and then they'll come back in fourth or fifth grade. Sometimes a lot of remediation and what that expense looks like. But I think this number is going to go up because also part of that House bill was increasing the salary limit for families, and many more families will be able to qualify, which means they'll be choosing that option. I think that's a number to watch, and I'm sure Wendy will have more information.
Yes, and we'll be budgeting, because we actually, our typical process is to budget what we had offset in the previous year. This year, we're going to budget about $15 million in anticipation of those going up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say thank you for being proactive and coming to us as quick as you've received this information. This is the first chance we've really had to look at some of the numbers as we're beginning to close out this year and looking to next year. And I know there's some discussions with our unions and others, so this is very timely as we move forward, because it is important that we put your money where your mouth is. You know, we always say we support and we're going to take care of, but quite frankly, in these times that are hard, particularly through having come through COVID, we need to look at providing increases to our folks across the board. So I'm hoping, praying, depending on where the dollars fall and the expenses, that we'll be able to set aside some funding to do just that. So thank you, and Ms. Dodge, I applaud you as well for your efforts in Tallahassee and working with the many legislators up there to let them know our priorities, because they are very important to us and we set them every year. So thank you so much for the work that you do quietly and sort of behind the scenes. So we appreciate that, and thank you for bringing that to us today. I look forward to our update in June.
Thank you. Before we move on, if we look at page 2, and I don't know if this is going to be a Wendy question back there, is there any possibilities, I know there's still a possibility of any items being vetoed? I don't know if we're looking at or we've heard, Wendy, of any of these items that could possibly be vetoed.
The governor still has the opportunity to veto any item. So these are the numbers that we know right now. And as you said, Wendy may have a better update on timing.
Okay.
So the budget has not been sent to the governor yet, which means everything is a possibility. So right now, we're not hearing about anything that might be vetoed, but that doesn't mean that it's not a possibility. Until the budget's sent to the governor, everything is on the table.
Do we need to say that so that everybody who didn't hear can
Yes,
hear on the microphone?
Wendy, what was stated was that, and we wanted to make sure we bring this forward, because you see items that are listed here, and the governor does not have the budget. So any of these items could be vetoed, but we're hoping that all of these items will continue to move forward for our district and for the state, and that they're not vetoed at that time. So, you know, that is something that we want to make sure we bring about and let everybody know about it. So I'll let you all continue.
No, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. So I thought it was great, too, to hear that we're going to fund on a second year here to get that threshold for our first-year teachers to 47.5 as well, 2 years in a row to do that. That's definitely a positive thing, if we can get that signed for sure. I'm curious on the emergency order funding adjustment, as you were talking through that a bit. So that adjustment was based on what our projected numbers were, but where we landed being underneath that threshold. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So our projected numbers for next year, is it based off of that adjustment or are we being hopeful that we'll have that number? Give me like your thinking process when you gave that number as far as our projected enrollment.
So that projected number, and there's a group of folks that are on a committee that talk about the numbers that they're seeing. So
Okay.
there must be at least 10 on that committee to talk about FTE. And the 109,000, and Ms. Jenkins, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the 109,476 students that we're projecting are essentially about the projection that we had going into this previous year.
Correct.
So we still feel confident that we're going to see those numbers. And those numbers don't really take into account a lot of the growth that you're seeing. So we're hoping we see more than that, but that is our best guess.
Okay, great. And I just think, that's been a constant conversation that we've had, and us tracking down students, and we've done pretty well on that. So just wanted to bring that to an awareness. Thanks.
Right. If I might add to that, Mr. Pitts is exactly correct. The 109 is where we should have been last year, and we feel comfortable we'll get there. The 106 is a little higher right now, as of today, as we're closing out the year. So we feel very comfortable that we'll hit that 109. That's where we at least started back to where we were supposed to start last year. So we didn't show a loss there, so we were able to get that gain back up. And so that's where we feel comfortable. That's where that number is coming into play. So his answer is actually correct. Thank you. Ms. Reynolds?
Hello, and this may be a Wendy question too, but the teacher salary increase allocation is about 1.9 million more this year. Is that the same process as it was before with the 80-20?
You want me to answer it?
Yes, looks like.
Wendy's nodding in the back, yes, so it would be
Yes, it is.
negotiating that.
That is negotiated. The difference, which is $1.9 million, will be used to follow the same process. The $18 million that is built in will support the increases that we did in the current year.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Miller?
I just have a quick question. I was contacted, some media were very interested in the fact that Winter Haven and Lakeland are the fastest growing cities it made national news, but I'm not sure of the data. And so are you guys provided that data? Like, how do we predict what this could look like, other than watching single-family homes go up by the hundreds? How are you predicting growth? Sorry, Jason.
I'm trying to think of a short answer to that question. We have a group over in facilities that actually are the drivers of watching the growth. And
Okay.
there's multiple items that they track, and they're in discussions with each city and what the cities are seeing in their growth. So unfortunately, I can't give you much of a more definite answer than that.
We also look at birth rates. So the children we think will be entering kindergarten, so we track that as a piece. We look at those that have left our district that we know or may know they're coming back in, because we do have some of that data. So as Jason said, it's a whole lot of different pieces of information that we track and follow to get to this number.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mrs. Miller, I will also add that I know in facilities, we have someone that, what they look at is the different developments and how many children possibly will be in each home, and they try to plan out from there. We can't build to growth, but they try to look at what the growth has been. If I'm not mistaken, Jason, I know you've been here, we've been projecting over between 1,500, 2,000 a year. Am I correct, students? So that's where we're kind of landing at each year, and that number. So, and as they're building the homes, I'm pretty sure that's going to go up, because that's what we've done for the last 2 to 3 years. But I'm pretty sure, as you've seen all the neighborhoods, that is going to change, and those numbers will change.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Reynolds?
This is getting a little bit away from budget, but it's still related, I promise. One of our city commissioners in Winter Haven came to me about a year ago now, which is how he ended up on our tax oversight committee, asking about concurrency. And in speaking with Angela, it sounds like concurrency is something that was negotiated in the 2008-2009 era, that may be something that we need to look at renegotiating the levels. It is within state law, but there's some parameters that are a little bit flexible as long as you have the agreement of the cities and the county where the building is. So I think that probably is something that we need to look at in the short term of how can we at least get some funding in from all of these developments that are going up, and how can they help us?
And just so you know, Angela Usher, she's not here today, but there are conversations that's been ongoing regarding concurrency with the Board of County Commission and different commissioners as well. So I will pass that on. As we're steady moving forward, those conversations need to continue Because as you see, like Ms. Miller said, Winter Haven, Lakeland is rapidly growing, and we're going to continue to grow. So that's going to be a conversation that I know she will continue. And they have meetings around just, the growth in the area, the concurrency with that. So we'll make sure those continue. I thought I said another hand before we move on to the next. Okay. You guys, thank you. If you want to go ahead, move on to I think we're on page, is it 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So as Mr. Pitts has shared with you, this is our first look at our funding. The page we're looking at now is our second step. We take what our estimated funding is believed to be, and we start working on our spreadsheet. So the first line is represents the 6.80% ending fund balance. That's what we believe it to be, barring a lot of changes. So this is just our first number. The second is our 2021 revenue. That's the amount that we have in the current year. We add on our new FEFP revenue. Then we take off McKay, Family Empowerment, and our categorical allocation, those two categorical allocations, because we are a pass-through for that funding. So it's not actually applied to our expenses. That leaves us with a negative 3.5 new general fund revenue. So this is one way in which the numbers can be deceiving until you start breaking them down. We have an estimated transfer amount of $81.6 million. Those are expenses that we have in capital funds that can be capitalized. We initially pay for them out of general, and we do a monthly transfer. For example, in any type of maintenance work, there are certain types that can be capitalized. So those items are reviewed and transferred on a monthly basis, and this is our yearly estimated number. That leaves us with a total available 21-22 revenue estimate of $972 million. The next section are items that we believe we're going to have to add to the budget. We have listed $2 million in various operating increases. That number could definitely change. Jason and I have been working with the different departments, and across the board, we've learned that expenses, items used for repair are increasing about 10 or 15% due to the problems with shipping that we've seen as a relative to COVID. So we're going to nail that number down and bring it back to you in a later work session. Turnaround services, that was cut. Our funding was cut for turnaround last year to $1.4 million. It's the same this year. So we did supplement for our schools that are in turnaround, and we anticipate having to do that again. Our AVID grade recovery, we put $500,000 towards that in the prior year, and we anticipate doing it again. Our FRS rate increase is fairly close to what we had believed all along. It's $3.6 million due to changes in the FRS rates. Our health insurance plan, we've brought to the board that an additional contribution of $40 is necessary this year to continue to bring our health fund to stability. So the cost of that is $6.3 million. This item is our $10 an hour to minimum wage. So what this does is brings our employees that are under $10 an hour up to that level in September when it becomes in effect. It's going to cost us about $737,000. It affects 496 staff members, and that number also includes our substitutes for custodians, bus drivers, and bus aides, because we have to raise the rate for those as well for our minimum wage. Instructional material adoption, categorical funding shortage. We talked about this the last time I came to the board, and our allocation for instructional materials is actually $8.7 million below what we anticipate we may need. We brought to you $13 million as our maximum expense, and that is what the difference of this is. There have been talks amongst the finance officers in the state of pursuing ESSER funding to help with this, since a lot of our instructional materials are digital. We don't have confirmation if that's allowable, but we are looking into it. And then we just talked about our teacher salary increase. $1.9 million is the difference. So these items we have to add to our budget, total $26 million. Our total new expenses, $26.3 million, bringing our estimated budgeted expense at this time to $933 million. So we're looking at our ending fund balance next year being $13.3 million. Taking all this into consideration, we've added in a $15 million lapse because based on prior years, we all know this past year was an anomaly, but that's a good guesstimate that we want to start with, just to give you detail. And all that being said, that brings us to a 3.37 estimated fund balance. So it is above the state minimum. It is almost 2% below the board, our board policy for fund balance. So this is our working area where we start.
Any questions on this chart? Mrs. Miller, followed by Mrs. Fields.
I just have a quick question about minimum wage. So we have people that are not at minimum wage, or that are higher than minimum wage, but not at the $10. So they're $9 and some change. We're going to take them in September to minimum wage.
Yes, ma'am.
So they're not going to be the dollar over minimum wage that they currently are now. They're just going to make it to minimum wage in September.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
At
you.
this time.
Mrs. Fields?
I think this question is for Mr. Jason. When did we start budgeting lapse dollars?
And we're not budgeting lapse dollars in this.
Anticipated lapse. Explain that, please.
So basically in this document, we're projecting where the fund balance is going to be. And we always show the lapse in there because we know we're going to have the lapse. There was one particular time that we budgeted lapse about maybe 5-6 years ago. But we need to show the lapse in our projections for fund balance because we know that it's going to happen. So if we did budget, we do budget that we're going to have 100% of our positions filled, and then the lapse just represents the difference between the vacancies is essentially the easiest way to say it. That comes from our vacancies during the year. But we're not budgeting it, we're just showing that lapse is going to give us an additional fund balance number. It's going to be a little higher than it would be if we didn't show that
Yeah, I just
lapse
wanna
in
I
there.
just want to make sure that we're not, because we all know what lapse means, and you can't depend on that.
That's, yes.
And then my other, I don't know if it's a question or just an observation. So if you go back to the required local effort where the monies were not rolled back, and it's like $7 million, and then you look over here, it sounds good a couple of pages over. But when you get back to this last page, then with the added new expenses, that money almost is washed out. Am I correct?
And yes, you are correct. And that's where our work begins now, that we have kind of a starting point in building our budget. But you're correct, that $7 million is not enough to sustain us next year without making some
Some
adjustments. Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields, the next slide may help show that. It's just a couple lines, but it shows our total new FEFP dollars. That's the number once you take out McKay and family empowerment before you look at anything else. And our new is 7.5 million, and our new categorical funding is 7.7. So the difference begins there because our non-categorical funding or our unassigned funding is actually $158,000 less than it was last year. So the biggest piece of our increase has come in categorical funding, or funding that it's specified how we have to spend it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The last slide today that we want to talk about is our COVID expenses today. So as you may know, there are 3 different large grants. There's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. The expenses listed on this sheet are our current expenses, and at the time we printed this, we had 3 items that you'll see pending amendment for approval. We received wonderful news that our amendment was approved. So items 2, 3, and 4 are now being processed. They are items that we have expended funding from our general fund, so now we can reimburse the general fund with these grant dollars. So we're processing that, and we will have our ESSER 1 grant expended as soon as we complete those amendments. Mrs. Porteous has come up to talk a little bit about, yes, ma'am.
Before you move on, so those 3, all 3 were approved?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Before we move on, do you all have questions about these expenses, or can I clarify anything for you?
Mrs. Miller?
Is that going to change the figures that you have on, sorry, on the previous page on the general fund budget projections?
Yes, ma'am. If the fund balance would actually go up to 5.17%
So it's-
once projected for next year. It will increase this year as well, but if you applied all this funding to the fund balance, rolled that forward to next year and applied it to our projections, we would end 21-22 with about a 5% fund balance.
I think that's important to know because 3.37 gets people a little nervous. I think showing that it's going to end at over 5 is much better than what the prediction was because we are conservative with that, which is good for us. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm here to bear good news today. One of the amendments or one of the issues or the line items that you see in the slide before you says an amendment. So essentially, right after we negotiated, or actually right after we finished impasse with PEA, Mrs. Bird charged us with finding some dollars for our staff. So not only did myself and Jason, the whole finance team, we all got together, scrubbed our budget pretty well, and could not find any dollars within our budget. However, we did find some dollars within the CARES Fund Act. So that will now, those dollars essentially will allow us to give the majority of our staff a $1,000 bonus, which will be paid in this month's check. And so that is for everyone that was employed, I think, on or before January 15th. And it will only exclude one group of people. The exclusions are those teachers that received more than a 2% raise from the TSIA funds. So if you look at our charts overall, you'll notice that the first year to third year teachers received about a 10% raise. I think after that it goes down to 7 and then 5, and then it breaks it down from there. So everyone who received less than a 2% raise is eligible for the $1,000. And this not only includes our teachers, but it also includes all of our support staff, all of our school bus drivers, all of our school bus attendants, food service, just everyone in the district. So we really, really worked hard to find that. We just received word actually yesterday from the Florida Department of Education that amendment was granted. So one of the things about CARES is that everything that we spend has to be approved from the Florida Department of Education. So I just wanted to share that good news with you today. We're really excited about it, and again, it will be in everyone's May paycheck. So again, it is a bonus. We understand that it's not reoccurring, but we just wanted to say thank you to our employees as much as we could.
And if I might add, I want to thank the team. They've been working on this since March. Was it March? When I charged them to find something for our other employees. And so I want to thank them. We've been waiting, I don't know how long, for the approval. It's gone through, I think, 3 steps, and they just got the final approval. So I do want to thank them for taking on that responsibility and working to make sure we give something else to our employees because they're truly deserving. I wish it could be more, but at least we can start and we can do the $1,000. So thank you to the team. Mrs. Miller, then Mrs. Reynolds, then Ms. Fortney.
So is this in addition to what the governor announced for teachers and principals?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, it is. Teachers and principals, per the governor's announcement, will get $1,000 that does not have anything to do with our $1,000.
So there's some that will be getting total of 2,000, but it might not be paid at the same time.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. And I think we are a pass-through for that, if I'm not mistaken, or is it coming directly from the state?
At this point, we've been told it's coming directly from the state.
Okay.
That could change, but that's the last I heard from DOE.
And Mrs. Miller, to your point, when the governor announced that, we wanted to ensure that our other staff receive something. It just seems like a lot, and I'm not faulting teachers at all, but we're sending a lot of money to our instructional staff. And so we wanted to send something to everyone else that makes the district work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I heard mostly from APs that were not included in that handle a bulk of what happens in a school.
Right.
So thank you.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this is a Jason or Heather question, but we have people that get paid twice a month now. So in May, that would be the last check in May for everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct? Okay.
Ms. Fortney?
I think Ms. Bird just clarified for me, but it's for our principals, assistant principals, deans, our 1,000.
As long as you were employed
Gotcha,
with the
okay.
district on or before January 15th, 2021, and you did not
Gotcha.
receive more than 2% in TSIA funds.
Got to look out for my people. Thank you.
Mrs. Fields?
First of all, I want to thank you, Superintendent Byrd, for listening and understanding that if the resources are available, that we need to direct it back to our staff. So kudos to you for that, for having a heart for the employees. And I want to thank the finance team and whoever else was involved in scrubbing those numbers and getting it all done so that we can actually let our employees know that we are listening. We do hear them, and we do know their concerns, and we're trying to do our very best. My question is, how are we going to roll this out so that everybody can understand it, so there won't be a lot of confusion on who gets what?
So I'm actually working with Mr. Jason Geary of Public Relations to draft a story, and then we will have a fact sheet available for staff. I'll put it together and send that out as well. And then the HR call center will field a lot of questions. That's normally where we get questions on salaries, et cetera. And so they will be able to answer those questions as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Miller?
Is there another step that has to be taken with an MOU with our unions for this money?
We've already talked to both of them, and
Okay.
everyone agrees. I
Okay.
think I talked to.
So it won't delay I'm
It
thinking,
will
I don't want
not
to delay
delay,
the process.
right,
Okay.
exactly. We wanted to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row, and last, that we had the amendment that we received yesterday before we informed you.
Thank
So,
you.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the finance team?
Thank you.
I had a quick one.
Sure. Ms. Fortney?
The FRS increase in contribution, that's above and beyond what we've already been charged and above and beyond the extra that we were tagged with last year as well?
Yes, ma'am, it
Can you
is.
tell me approximately how much we contribute to FRS every single year?
Off the
I'm
top
gonna
of
go
my
into
head,
banking.
but I can get you the amount shortly. I'll get that
Okay.
for you.
Yeah, it just
It's-
seems like a lot of money.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about, 60 million right off the top of my head.
60.
We'll confirm for
Oh,
you.
We'll make sure we get that to each of you once they confirm those numbers.
you.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You okay? The next item that's coming before you is Ms. Candy. I see her back there now. Cypress Junction, Montessori, and we have a contract, charter contract renewal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Back in December, we brought to you the Cypress Junction renewal document. We have now negotiated a contract, so it is in front of you as a draft. Mr. Bridges has already done a public notice hearing for June for an approval of a vote. So it is a standard contract, so there's no additions or deletion. It is standard language issued by the Department of Education. We just kind of filled in the blanks of the term, the dates, the grade level, the address, just some of those basic information. So do you have any questions?
Mrs. Miller?
I feel like I'm the person today. I just want to say I appreciate the work of Cypress Junction, as that's a charter that I've visited and is very well received in that community. They're doing the work that we don't do, which is a different type of a learning environment that works for a lot of kids. So I just want to publicly support what Cypress Junction is doing and appreciate the fact that we can renew this without question of who's running the operation or how often they meet or how often they hear from the public. Because it's important that the public has access to the boards of these charters that we don't make decisions for. And so I appreciate Cypress Junction because they've done that well and been very responsive. Thank you.
And Mrs. Miller, just to add to that, if you look under Section 9 where it talks about governance, we did make sure we kept that language just consistent. We do not have a problem with Cypress Junction, but just so that it's consistent and it is in there, we did add that piece.
I appreciate that. So it looks like we're not being favored to outside or inside charters, but the fact that they have never wavered from having local support or local representation is something that I appreciate. Thanks, Cindy.
Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, I am able to go over there and actually teach, so I enjoy going there. And as Ms. Miller said, the Montessori model, if you just know anything about it, it is just a fabulous learning and teaching model. I'd like to see them where they are automatically renewed for 5 years. And
Absolutely.
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you.
Okay, so the item will come to you in June for a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there's more good news. We have coming before, I saw Ms. Luce come in, and I believe I'm looking for Alice Johnson and Debbie Rye. Are they in the room? There they are. Some exciting news coming for one of our schools, and they're going to share that of a new name. And Mr. Duncan's joining them.
Ms. Luce, I'll introduce Ms. Johnson and Ms. Rice, so you know they're part of that committee, and Ms. Luce. This is Alice Johnson. She's the network manager at Ben Hill Griffin Junior Elementary, the current Ben Hill Griffin Junior Elementary. And Ms. Debbie Rye is the current media specialist at Frostproof Elementary. And I will say, along with Ms. Luce, it was a robust committee. And Frostproof is a very passionate community. I think that everyone was heard, and Ms. Johnson and Ms. Rye can speak more to that, but I think that they come up with exactly the right name. So, thank you.
Would you all like to go ahead? You want to pull the...
Well, good afternoon, Debbie Rye, and it's much more difficult to speak to you. I've been been a teacher for 30 years. It's way different in kindergarten, first and second. So the heart is like going like this, and we're in front of them all day. But it was a very passionate, I think, committee that met. It was a very diverse committee that met from all different people in the community, from Frostproof Elementary and Ben Hill, a rep from the high school, and I think definitely probably the most passion came from our schools. So Frostproof Elementary was very passionate about wanting to keep the name Frostproof Elementary, and Ben Hill Griffin was very passionate about wanting to keep Ben Hill Griffin Elementary. So I feel like the committee did a great job in merging the two names. I think that was the best decision at this point, that we kept both. And then we did decide, at first we did not have on the survey the word ending elementary, but we did decide at the final Zoom meeting that we would place that back on, because then it kept the integrity of both names. That's from Frostproof Elementary School.
Ms. Johnson, do you have any words to say?
Just appreciated the opportunity to be on this committee and being able to work with the other school, and for us to come together. And And, we both, like she said, both schools felt very passionate about our names, so we've come up with putting them both together.
And as I said, it was a very passionate and great committee. It was one of the best I've been involved in the 15 or more years that I've worked on naming committees here for the county. There was more community involvement from the city of Frostproof than there has been from any other naming committee we've ever done, and that was very nice to see, very good to see the community get so involved. So with that, the committee would like to recommend to you the name Frostproof Ben Hill Griffin Jr. Elementary.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is an action item that will come before you tonight. Are there any questions?
Great job.
Comment.
Mrs.
Yes, I just
Cunningham?
want to thank the Frostproof community for coming out and supporting both schools. I think anytime you move in this type of an endeavor, it is so important to make sure that you include the history and the legacy and all of that to combine the two schools. So when I did read that, I thought that was an awesome decision by the group to keep the names basically together intact going forward. So I commend you all. I'm sure it took a lot of time and effort. I know we've done a lot of these up in my area, and we thank you in the community for the time and effort that you've put into this to make sure that it's something going forward that everybody's happy with and very proud of as we move forward. So just a thank you. And Ms. Luce, thank you for your leadership.
Mr. Allen?
So, yeah, just to follow up as well, Frostproof is pretty dear to me. My grandma and grandpa's love story started out there in Frostproof, and and there's even deeper connections with my great-grandparents, one of them actually working in the district as a cabinet maker, my great-grandpa, and my great-grandma then being an elementary school teacher. So there's definitely some roots there. So talking with a couple individuals from your community, they're very happy with the outcome here as well, to keep the naming convention there that has so much significance within that community as well. So thanks for the work on that.
Any other comments? Thank you both, and I look forward to coming back out, seeing the addition. I believe is it open yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Almost, okay. I'll be back out. Maybe they'll let me through this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on a great job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next item is going to come before you, was asked to be put on by a board member, and it's a discussion on the two facility policies regarding naming of facilities. Ms. Dodge is going to come and start that discussion at this time.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm hoping that I have the right computer here.
Welcome back.
Thank you. What have you guys been up to while I've been gone? Anything going on?
We've missed you.
Thank you. All right, they told me that the documents would be in the middle of the screen, but I'm looking at the middle of the screen.
Just right here.
Sorry for the delay. But just to start, while we're going, a discussion had been requested regarding the naming of facilities policy and then the commemoration of buildings and other ancillary facilities, which was a different policy. And so what I'd like to do here is that going to go up on the screen? Is just kind of review what we have in place right now and then allow the board to kind of discuss where you'd like to go with these policies and what kind of changes you'd like to make. So the first policy is 7250, which is commemoration of school facilities. And there it is. Yay, we're so excited. So, and this process is about when we have different buildings on a school site and we want to commemorate or put a plaque or name them after somebody. And so this process is different than the naming process that you just heard about, where there's a committee and there's a very formal process in place as to how to bring that to the board. And so this policy basically just talks about the type of people that we would like them to be named after, and then the fact that recommendations can come to the board. And it really doesn't say from who, it can come from anybody if someone is making a recommendation to name something. On the naming a school or renaming a school, that's a process that's in the policy. It says who has to be involved. It requires the school board member for that area to be involved, the SAC, all sorts of community and stakeholder input. And so from here, I guess I would like to turn it over to the board and just hear about the changes that you're interested in making in either or both of those processes.
Mrs. Miller?
And I know Mr. Wilson had mentioned this because of some things that have came up with naming buildings. And I've been honored to be a part of two, I don't know if it's actual building or the rooms. We had a cafeteria named at East Area Adult, and then a athletic facility or area named at Auburndale High School. And it really was driven by community. So I think if the community brings us that person that was, exemplary of the things that you've listed here, I don't know that I don't know that I have opposition to following the process of them holding their meetings, coming up with a nomination, involving the board member to write a letter of recommendation. I think it's worked well. I think we do run into issues because we've named buildings after people long ago that may have not been as upstanding as when history was told. And I mean, like, I hate, we've had governors and things from years and years ago that were important to some people, and then later on, it was, I hate to go back and try to remove a name. So I don't know what's been, I guess I'm looking for your experience and guidance on the process.
I think that we may have seen around the state lately, there have been a lot of school districts that have been involved in renaming schools because of whatever, they found the names unacceptable. And so there was a process involved there. I think that the issue seems to be difficulty in distinguishing between the process for naming a facility, the whole school, and the process for naming just a building or a gymnasium or something on the school. So as I was reviewing the other large district policies, one thing that I did notice is that everybody else has it all in one policy. And so I think that might help our community and our staff when they are looking for what to do, if it were all in one policy instead of two different, because the second one is called commemoration of facilities. So if you did a search for naming, it wouldn't necessarily come up. And so I think that probably the first common sense step would be to combine them into one policy. And then second of all, there isn't really a process in place for the commemorations of a building. It's just, there's not even a requirement for community input. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. So I'd like to suggest that we kind of make the processes similar. If you want to make it easier for a commemoration rather than the naming of a whole facility, we can certainly narrow down the process. But in terms of, it's an extensive process for naming the facility, and it's kind of, hey, let's together and take something to the board for the other process. So we could certainly put something in there that was a little more substantive, if you would like to.
I would like to see the community involvement. They have been in both of mine, but it wasn't a requirement.
Right.
So if there's some kind of, if we're going to have a requirement, I don't know if it needs to be as lengthy as naming a whole school, but some kind of involvement from so many different community members, so everybody's represented.
So maybe if we just ask for documentation of community and school involvement.
I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Reynolds, followed by Ms. Cunningham.
And I hate that Mr. Wilson wasn't able to be with us this morning, because I know that this is something he's been very passionate about. But I think a lot of our conversation has stemmed around what you were just discussing with when naming a building. It's done in a SAC meeting a lot of times, which there's not a ton of involvement in our SAC meetings at several schools. So when there's only 10 people there and 10 people decide to change the name of to name a building, I think we do need to get more community involvement. And I don't know that the list needs to be as extensive as the naming of school, but I do think that there should be some check marks of who the principal has to be involved, somebody that works at the school has to be involved, so many community members, just to make the school board member from that area, just to make sure that it's not a group of 3 or 4 people that say, okay, let's do this, and then it's done, that there is a little bit more structure to who's on that committee. One of the things that I've always found very troubling with naming any of our buildings is naming things after people that are still alive. My preference would always be to name them after people who have passed on. I think naming the building at Bartow High School for Rodney Turner this year is probably one of the best examples of what naming a building should look like. That I think we could learn a lot from the process that they used of getting the community buy-in. But I think it should be something that we use in memory, not necessarily as this person was a great teacher of the year and let's name a building after them. Because as we've learned, as Ms. Miller mentioned, people screw up. It's not anybody, things happen. So the last thing I want is for us to have a building named after someone that we regret in the newspaper 20 years later. So that's something that's always been very concerning to me.
Mrs. Cunningham?
Yes, and we have done it both ways. Obviously, we've had the naming of the large schools, obviously, which is a prescribed process, maybe more so than the other. However, in my time, we've had both in memorial ones and also ones for folks that are currently with us. And I am not opposed to doing that. I think you need to take into account who the person is. You need to take into account what the community says about that individual. And I think sometimes if that person can be honored while they're still living and be able to come to a board meeting, which they used to do, and receive that recognition while still with us and their family, has been beautiful to me personally. So I am in favor of allowing either one, but obviously that's a board vote. For example, the recent one was Coach G at Haines City High School. What a wonderful opportunity to name the weightlifting room after him and for all he did for 30-something years at Haines City High School. And then I also understand the in memorial, that we did for Coach Wegman after she passed of cancer, because of the students that she impacted and the scholarships and on and on. So having lived through several years of this, I kind of feel like it should be both, but I do agree with my colleagues that in the sense if it's going to be someone who is currently living, I'm with her. I don't think you do that after a person's a teacher of the year or something like that. I think, towards the end of their career, if that's something that comes up. But I do agree with both colleagues that it should be vetted through the community. It should be vetted through, obviously, the principal, SAC committee, and that whole, I thoroughly agree. But I am not one that feels that you need to wait until someone has passed in order to name a facility on a school site after them. And it depends on the person and all those kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
I like the idea, Ms. Wendy, that you have consolidating the policies together, maybe 1A, 1B. I don't know how you would do it. I also like the idea of making sure that the community is involved, that the administrator of the school is involved, and a board member, so I like that. I'm of the opinion, give me my flowers while I can see them, because when I die, I won't know what anybody's doing. So I'm not in support of excluding someone because they are alive. I think we need to honor them if they are due honor them while they can see the honor. So I would not be in support of saying that unless you die, you can only get recognized at that point in time.
Thank you. Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, I agree. But are we really talking about like planting a tree with a plaque that says, you know, or a garden from somebody who passed and a bench? As a school site member, we had benches with plaques and that's not the same? I just want to clarify.
That is considered a commemoration, which would be covered under this policy. And it's, you
'Cause
know,
we didn't
right
do
now,
this.
the
I hate to
school
say it.
just does it, right? And then the naming of a facility is covered under the
Right.
separate policy.
All I'm saying is that at the schools that we did it at, we never even knew there was a policy on it.
Right.
Just
I
letting
think
you
that's
know.
part of the problem.
Yeah, as usual.
So, I'm sorry, did I?
Mr. Allen, I think it.
Just a couple more questions. I mean, this is good for me just to hear the background on this. And I think I'm with Sarah Fortney a little bit as I'm reading this, you know, series of items. I think what prompted a thought was if someone donates something to the school with a, you know, plaque on that, say if it's a bench or something, at what point does that donated item become a facility? So how do we define facility? I know there's like this series of items to determine that, but when the item is donated, does it then become part of that physical place? Second question I was asking, I don't know, I guess I see the process coming up. Does the school lose any autonomy in that? And I was just curious if there's a feeling on that in any way.
Autonomy regarding the donation?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there's some language, and I'm going to have to find it, but there is some language in the naming of the school facilities, and memorials is the end of that. And so it does talk about if something's donated, it has to be, the school can't accept it if it's going to be an ongoing expense for the school, if it was a donation. It says, the board shall not accept a gift of art unless the cost of installation, operation, and maintenance is consistent with the value. It talks about, let's see, you can't erect an honor roll memorial except by approval of the superintendent of the board. They have to be limited. A simple landscaping project would be acceptable, and there has to be no maintenance necessary. So those are considered as part of the overall naming policy, but not necessarily in the individual buildings commemoration policy. So we could certainly, as we combine those, we could make those requirements consistent between the two. And we could also, when I was going through other districts' policies, one of the things I noticed is that if they addressed the fact that naming could or could not be named after someone who was deceased. Some of them they had to be deceased 1 year, all the way up to 5 years. But that was just for naming an entire school. And then on the individual building and the memorial commemoration type, they allowed them to be named after either living or deceased. And then, but you had to document the extraordinary, what the living person had done to have this named after them.
Okay. I see Ms. Miller's hand and then Ms. Cunningham.
I just want to make sure that when we do allow these monuments or whatever, the gardens especially, I've been to schools where the garden had been placed years ago and it's not kept up. So I think that's super disrespectful to that person.
Okay.
So to maintain, the tree, the weeds are gone from around it. Like if you're gonna have a plaque, I need to be able to read it. Unfortunately, people get busy and budgets are cut, and sometimes we're not caring for those areas. Or there's been 3 or 4 principals, and we're 2 decades later, and nobody remembered the person. Everybody's retired that was there. But I think if we're gonna commit to that for the family, that we should commit to the upkeep of it. So someone new doesn't come in and decide, hey, that butterfly garden needs to be something else. I think that would help. And it's usually, it's not intentional, but I just want to make sure that, because I've been in some places where I thought, oh, we should take better care of that monument. So if we could include that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Cunningham?
So I would like to ask if maybe, if you'd be so kind, between now and our next work session to do some of the things that you've indicated, to try to put it together and put some of the suggestions that you've heard today and bring us something back. And I'm sure hopefully Mr. Wilson will be back at that time. He
Right.
can take a look at it, and then perhaps we can move forward, because I know we've talked about it for several work sessions now. So it'd be nice to have something going forward with all the suggestions incorporated. Would that be something we could suggest?
I will draft something up based on the input and probably more input.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Reynolds, Ms. Reynolds, I see your hand.
I was just going to ask if you shared that you've looked at a couple other large districts' policies. Would you mind sharing those with us? Any that you think are,
You want me to email them to you, or you just want me to let you know now what the difference
if you want to
is?
email them to us so we can look at
I'd be
them, that
happy
would
to
be
do
great.
that, yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Miller?
I have a question, since you're here at the desk, before you run off. Session ended, and we are still waiting, like we saw today, with the governor signing things. When will it be a good time for you to return? Or are you going to provide us with, there's a lot of things to provide us with.
Right.
Is that something you're going to do for us at a work session?
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Miller, we talked about that once everything was over, and I know she just returned and jumped on this policy here to bring that update to you all as a board for the closing sessions and everything that happened.
And we have until the end of May, right, for to see what is actually signed. There's a timeline from the end of session.
End of June.
End
yeah.
of June.
Once session is completed, when things are sent to the governor, you wouldn't know it the way he's signing everything so quickly this year, but he actually has like 15 days to sign things.
Okay, I thought it was
So,
longer. Okay.
So he doesn't have an opportunity to sign anything until it's been signed by the officers in the House and Senate and sent to him. And once it is sent to him, then he has 15 days, I believe, to sign, veto, or allow to become law without his signature.
And I think if we had the update before then, I haven't seen a lot of education stuff. That's usually not what gets vetoed at the last minute, but
Right.
you could definitely make us aware of something that you thought would be. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get that on the agenda. I'll get with you, Mrs. Dodge.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, we're running a little ahead of schedule. Madam Chair, would you like to take the break now, or would you like to continue? Take the break? Okay, so would you like 10 minutes or 15 at this point? 15? So we have a 15-minute break. And we're going to go with our next item, which is our mask update. Madam Chair, before I turn, the next two items are for the board over to you. I just want to remind the board, we do have an executive session at the conclusion of work session today, and we only have one discipline case.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrd. Okay, so to start off the discussion, I felt that with the group that had come last time, that were so kind and so well-spoken and very peaceful, that it was time for us to talk about masks in Polk County. So I was going to start off with some thoughts that I've had talking with folks from throughout Polk County, and I think each of us maybe can weigh in kind of how you feel. With the fact that we are a few weeks from the end of school, I would like to suggest that we continue with masks until the end of the school year, not the fiscal year, the end of the school year. And what that would be up through June 4th, 2021. And there's several reasons for that. Number one is, and probably the most compelling to me, is high school graduations. Having had a child who graduated a year ago, if she had been unable to participate in her graduation ceremony because she was contact traced or whatever it may be, would have been totally disheartening to my husband and I. And I would not want that for any one of our children who, as difficult as it's been through COVID, who have continued to persevere to get to this point. Because once again, you may not have COVID, but if you're contact traced through one of our high schools, you would be possibly excluded from going to your own high school graduation. And I understand, I see the signs, I see the sentiments, I listened to everybody at our last meeting. So I'm starting off the discussion. I don't know how the board members feel, but that's how I feel. And I would like us to consider, you know, keeping the mask in place until the end of the school year, which would be the last day would be June 4th of 2021. Also, I want to express to you that I've discussed this concept with both our current Superintendent Byrd and with our new Superintendent, Frederick Hyde, both of which feel the same way that I do, that it just doesn't make sense with only a couple weeks left to take a chance, particularly with graduations, particularly with health department not weighing in, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I'm one person, I'm one out of 7 people here, or 6 tonight, and so that is how I feel. But board members, and we all know, let me just be clear, our governor's order, and Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, our governor's order indicated as of July 1, the masks and all that are going to go away for the upcoming year. Am I correct? Does anybody hear anything different? Based on the executive orders, that's probably going to go away for the next school year.
We're going to wait to
Yes,
Mr. Bridges.
yes, Mr. Bridges.
Precisely what the executive orders say.
Okay.
The first executive order says that,
Can you?
no later than, mask off.
Yes.
Okay, no later, and I apologize, I'm so used to it. The first executive order says that emergency mandates passed by agencies like school boards, municipalities, and counties will all go away, will all be vacated on July the 1st.
Yes.
Those are emergency orders that were adopted through emergency procedures. It does not apply to orders that were adopted through regular rulemaking, which is how the School Board of Polk County did theirs. So the first one will not apply to us.
Okay.
The second one does not apply to school districts at all. It applies only to municipalities and
Okay.
counties. So for those districts that used emergency powers to adopt emergency rules
Yes.
and enactments, then those will all be vacated on July the 1st. Ours will not.
Ours will not. Okay, so therefore, what I'm saying then would be to keep masks in place through the end of the school year on June 4th, and then after that, let me be clear, to make it optional, because there are some children or parents or families that will want to do that, and what I'm talking about only addresses children. It does not address the
Madam
adults,
Chair,
the
I
teachers.
probably ought to go one step further and tell you that I don't think your policy is going to require any amendment at all. Your policy does not mandate that anyone wear a mask. Your policy says that during times of elevated communicable disease,
Yes.
pandemic, the superintendent has the authority to activate this policy, let's see here, to notify school communities that requiring school and district staff, volunteers, and visitors to wear masks unless it's unsafe to do so. And later on, it says, during those times, the board may require that students in kindergarten and higher grades wear a face mask unless they're unable to do so for health or development reason. By the same token, all the school board, when you're ready, all the school board has to say is, it's no longer mandatory. You don't have to change your policy.
Okay, all right. So that was my thought, and I will open it up to other board members. I don't know how y'all feel, but that was where I was going, and I'm welcome to take comments accordingly. Mrs. Fields?
I have a question before I have comments. Mr. Bridges, how does the MOU with the PEA apply?
I'm glad you asked. The MOU, the language in the MOU refers to the executive order, the emergency order from DOE, I believe it was 2020-07, I'm sorry. And it is effective through the spring semester unless extended or canceled by subsequent order, but no later than June 30, 2021. So the end of the spring semester in Polk County is June the 4th. So this is an either or. And I checked this morning, as of this morning, that emergency order had not been extended. So once again, the language says that the order is effective, or the MOU is effective through the spring semester unless it is extended or canceled by subsequent order, but in any event, no later than June 30th of 2021. So if there were a subsequent order, it still would not extend this MOU past the 21st. But plain reading of that is it goes through the end of the spring semester.
Okay, so.
Yes, ma'am.
So in actuality, we have to honor that and keep the mask in place until June the 3rd, 4th?
I believe the MOU would require the wearing of masks through June the 4th, the last day of the spring semester.
Okay.
Yes, it's absolutely required by the MOU. There is not an option. It would be a breach of the MOU to lift that requirement before that time.
And thank you for that, for clarifying that for me.
Yes, ma'am.
I had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Hyde as well. And Mr. Hyde and my conversation was similar to his and Ms. Cunningham. He would like to be in on the discussion when a decision is made, and he also believes that we need to keep everything in place so that our seniors can graduate from high school. There won't be any disruption from them being quarantined if they get COVID, and that we need to really be encouraging, we can't mandate, but encouraging others to get their vaccine. I talked to parents, I've spoken to teachers, I've spoken to non-employee staff, and there's a combination of both. Some wanting to discontinue using the mask, but the majority of them, especially the teachers, want to see masks still in operation to the end of the school year. And then looking in June to see what the Health Department, CDC, and what we think is going to be best, along with input from the community, and then making a decision that's going to be hopefully in the best interest of everyone. I understand, I think all of us understand about this mask. I wear this mask every day at Girls Inc., which is my other job with the girls and the staff. I understand that everybody's not going to be vaccinated. That's just not going to happen. I think our percentage is maybe 25% of our county is vaccinated. So that means 75% of our people are not. Don't know how that's going to change, if that will. But for right now, I think we need to stay the course and work through the end of the month, through the first week of June. And then when we get our incoming superintendent in place, have a discussion and come up with the best strategies to hopefully transition from having masks to making it optional. That's my opinion on the matter.
Thank you, Mrs. Fields. Ms. Fortney?
Well, is there any way, Mr. Bridges, that we as a board could at least look at outside in the heat? Our kids are out there in PE and stuff. Is that against board policy if we don't, if we are able to maybe relieve them of outside? How does that, I'm
Yeah,
asking legally.
The MOU does, my reading of it, I did not notice that it talked to outside wear at all. It said on campus. But I would think that would be something that could be a point of discussion.
Well, okay.
Mrs. Byrd?
Ms. Fortin, if I will add, we have what we call our COVID-19 manual for our administrators in our schools. It is on, I believe, on page, is it page 9? Page 9 regarding the outside, that is optional. They do not have to have it when they're outside at play. And I noticed that several schools we've gone by, they're not in masks when they're at play, but that is in there. We actually reviewed that again in one of our end of the year discussions with our administrators as well.
Okay, let me clarify that then. So as of right now, our kids did not have to wear masks while they're out at PE if they were socially, okay, good enough.
It's true. Okay, Ms. Reynolds? Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Reynolds?
Before I go into my comments, how have we been communicating that to our schools? Because I don't think that that is public knowledge.
It was communicated at the beginning of the year when we went through all of our processes, worked closely with the Department of Health, and it was part of the playbook that we sent our principals. And then anytime we had issues, we dealt with them. There were some questions. We had a meeting with principals the other day and clarified it. Obviously, with it getting hot, everybody wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Okay.
Could you hear him?
Yes. Yeah, I just would want to make sure that we go back and even now are sending a follow-up reiteration of making sure that not just our principals, but making sure that they're making the PE coaches and those who are supervising kids outside aware, because I don't think that that is public information. I mean, I can name at least 5 schools off the top of my head that I've driven by in the past 2 weeks that have kids in masks outside. So.
I will say, Mr. Hill did make sure he had a meeting to reiterate that with the administrators and everything, and he'll continue to do the follow-ups as he sent out the closeout to make sure they go back. But it is in the manual, and he's gone over that. So he'll make sure he continues to follow up with that to make sure they're not allowing those kids to be outside in their masks while they're playing at play.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
Okay.
Do you have-
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I had real comments too.
Go
but
ahead.
That
Sure.
sidetracked me. You know, going into this, I was all in support of it being optional from the beginning. But I do think that we made a decision at the beginning of the school year and that we need to honor that decision through the end of the school year because parents made choices based on our decision to make masks mandatory. So to lift it now for the last 2 to 3 weeks of school, that would require us to allow everyone to make a new decision, which I know if you talk to most of our administrators and teachers, kids coming in and out, switching from virtual to e-learning to brick and mortar has been the bane of their existence for this year, just because the kids are always moving and there's a lack of continuity in what they're able to teach. So I agree completely with my colleagues, keeping it till the end of the year. Meeting, I believe our first June meeting is that Tuesday right after school gets out. If we can have a discussion and work session with Mr. Hyde, because I believe Superintendent Byrd, correct me if I'm wrong, but he'll be here on the 8th.
That is correct. He will be here at the June 8th meeting, and my discussion that he had with me is that he wanted to have that discussion then where he could be a part of it.
Okay.
That was his discussion with me.
So having him here on the 8th, having it in the work discussion, and then voting that evening officially.
Voting that evening. Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a quick question to follow up on what Ms. Reynolds had asked. Because we have some charter systems that are currently, for the first time, waiting for us to make decisions for them, can we communicate that same policy manual? Because they would not have received that, unless I misunderstand. Would the charter systems or charter schools receive the same COVID manual that we give to our schools?
They don't usually use our manual. They would come up with their own.
They do their own.
They have their own.
Okay, so that was one question, because that's some misinformation. I think there's a lot of misinformation, unfortunately. I don't believe anyone intended for this to keep going until next year. And as I look through the list of policies that were created as policy, not as emergency orders, multiple districts. The ones I see that have none are very, very small. So I know that this isn't something that we cooked up on our own, and I think we were trying to do what was best for kids at the time and teachers, which we're still, I think, doing that. I appreciate the offer of requesting the push for outdoor unmasked. I have a 9-year-old, she's 10 years old today, I'm here with you guys, who wears a mask all day. And so having that opportunity to be, I know what it means to a small child to be outside and able to take that mask off in this heat. So I think that's very important. And I think Wes, I appreciate what you sent over just to see what other people were doing in other districts that are similar in size. Right now we're at over 105,000 students. If smaller charter systems wanted to change something for 3 schools at a time or 7 schools at a time, they could do that on their own without our seal of approval. That was my question. Okay. So I agree that, you know, when I met with some parents, they were very concerned with mental health, and I think that's very important. And I talked to Mr. Hyde about it, and he agreed that having some kind of community committee or advisory to talk about how to enter into the fall, especially for the young children who've only known masks going to school, and how a year in a child's life is a very long time, how it's important to talk about what that mental health looks like, and our high schoolers, who some of them have been very reclusive and introverted, and now how do we make sure they're going to complete the social skills training and things that are needed. And he advised that that was a great idea, and he would like to include community members along with mental health professionals in our community, because we're going to have to talk about what it looks like, and some for our teachers. And we've had staff members die of COVID. It's just a fact. And some of our teachers that were there, it was their colleague. So there might be mental health needs in that arena as well. So I think starting to address how it will look in the fall early on will be positive for all students and teachers. But again, if we could get out about the heat outside, that was my biggest concern for kids. I think that will relieve a lot of the student stress, especially the young kids and the kids in sports. So I agree that we need to wait. I want to see graduations. I miss the days of being able to touch the kids and see the kids, and to know that they could be compromised. I see something I'm not able to risk today. So I'd like to make those accommodations or remind people of the accommodations, and look at having that meeting with Mr. Hyde and concluding whatever process Wes advises us of to end the policy allowing, not the policy on masks, because that doesn't exist, but a policy allowing the superintendent to make those decisions. That will be removed completely? Is that how that works, Wes? Or will it be put on pause because we're not going to be in a pandemic at the sense that we were in at one time?
You can change your policy if you wish, but the policy does not require anybody to wear a mask. The policy allows the superintendent to activate it during times of community transmission of communicable disease, and then the school board to require students from kindergarten and higher grades to wear masks during that time. Whenever you are ready to say we're past that, all it's going to require is someone to say, I make a motion that we suspend the mandatory mask requirement and make masks optional beginning such and such a day. Second, and a vote.
And from what I can tell from many of these districts, they're doing it the last day of school or soon after.
Most of the districts that we've seen that have a policy, there are some districts that adopted a policy that automatically expires the last day of school.
Okay.
So it's not an issue for them. There are others who adopted a policy that was open-ended, and they are amending their policies. There are some who are not doing anything. Orange County said they've got the policy on the books, and they don't have a discussion scheduled. They'll wait and see. Great big county. You've got, as you mentioned, some smaller counties that had never had a mask policy. So districts are kind of all over the waterfront on this, but it appears that the trend with the larger districts was to have some mask requirement, and depending on how they implemented that, they're either now moving to change the policy to end it, or if their policy doesn't require changing, just to take board action to end it with the end of the school year. So
Thank you.
That's what we're seeing.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Dr. Allen?
So my question is, to the board, how do we actually get there, right? We've got a couple recommendations here, to try to build consensus based on what we just heard. What's that process? Is what I'd like to know. Second question, and I do have some prepared comments as well, and I don't know if I need to get to them at this point until I get to hear you guys flesh some of this out a bit. But what does the extended school year contract look like? So if we make, a motion, or if we make a move towards ending at June 4th, what's the impact of our summer school extended year contract going to look like?
So may I answer that or begin to, and then other colleagues can add? I would recommend that I feel like we're all pretty much in consensus. I think everybody's looking at maybe the end of the school year, but we don't meet till June 8th. So that becomes the question, do we want to wait and have a workshop with our new superintendent, Mr. Hyde, on June 8th? Workshop it and then vote maybe that evening, which would include a provision possibly for staff and/or summer school. I don't have those answers today, but to me, that would be the logical thing to do. The only other option is to vote on removing the making masks optional as of Monday, June 7th, after school is out on the 4th. I only see those two. So it's up to this board go ahead. Yeah, so I want to open it up. We can go either way. We can vote on it tonight to make masks optional after the 4th when school ends, and then have a discussion with Mr. Hyde going forward for summer school, for staff and so forth. Or we can wait until June 8th, have a workshop discussion with Mr. Hyde, and then talk about it and vote on the evening of June 8th. It is completely up to this board. Mrs. Fields.
Mr. Hyde has requested that he be involved in discussion, so out of respect for him, I think we need to have discussion on the 8th, and if we're all in agreement that we would make it optional after we have our meeting on the 8th, then we can go forth with that. But I think it would be a very, I'm not going to say disrespectful, but to me, it would be very disheartening for our new superintendent coming in, wanting to have input and discussion, and we basically make a decision without him being here to provide his input. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. And I will say, I did talk to him yesterday, and he's fine either way, just so you know.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Fortney? Mr. Bridges?
Madam Chair, it bears comment. Of course, I shared with you yesterday a cease and desist letter that we received from an attorney in Alachua County named Jeff Childers. It was a nice piece of writing. It was very critical, obviously, of the mask policy. He refers to it as harmful and irrational involuntary masking policy, and the headings in his letter are: masked education is poor quality education, masks harm children, the district's mask policy is anti-scientific, the masking policy fails the rational basis test. And at the end, let's see here, he wrote, my clients expect the school board to agree to the demand by announcing its agreement to immediately suspend enforcement of the masking policy at the next scheduled school board meeting on Tuesday, May 11th, today. This was received just before lunch yesterday. And should the school board defy logic, common sense, ethics, and science and refuse to agree, then that he's been directed to commence litigation as soon as possible. We are still unpacking that, but my initial research in response to it yielded that there are at least 5 counties that have had similar complaints brought, each of which was resolved in favor of the county. That's Indian River, Palm Beach, Hillsborough, Alachua, and St. Lucie. Further, we have Senate Bill 72 recently enacted into law, which affords protections to agencies like school boards from COVID liability if they are making good faith efforts to follow governmental guidance, starting, of course, with the CDC. So if you fail to do that, then you lose that protection. And Mr. Childers may very well file something. I suspect that if the school board decides to wait until the meeting on June the 8th to do this, it's very likely that we will be past that time before there would be any resolution of that, and it would become moot. But I did want to, you are all aware it's out there, but I wanted to comment about that publicly so that everyone understands that is not being ignored. That's being taken very seriously.
So is there consensus then to wait to June 8th to have a discussion with Mr. Hyde in workshop and then take that information to a vote that evening? Is that kind of where we're at? And then I think some of your questions between now and then would be answered as he begins his transition. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. He's going to start his transition period with us starting this Wednesday, tomorrow, May 12th through June 30th. So I think with those transition opportunities that he will have, I think each one of us will be able to speak to him individually and so forth, and then be able to be ready to discuss it on the 8th in workshop, and then take it for a vote as to how we want to handle, at least going forward for the summer. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think Mr. Allen is finished.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think moving towards a mask optional environment for next school year is definitely the way forward, right? I can go back a year from now and remember when on campus, Florida Southern College, it was announced that everybody's leaving, right? And that emotional impact of my senior art students not being able to exhibit their artwork. So I recognize the emotional impact. So I'm definitely not in favor of, let's not make a dramatic change right now. We definitely want our students to graduate and, receive that diploma and walk across the stage. There's something about physically grabbing that diploma and walking across the stage. Now, if we look around the state, and, I've read the cease and desist order. There's problems in there I definitely see because I know I've reached out to the DOE specifically, and I wanted to get some substantiation around the statement that was written in the letter from the Department of Education in regards to, if we look at, there was actually about 25 school districts around the state that did not have a mask requirement. So just wanting to look at some of that data to try to formulate some of my opinions. And if we look thus far, we already see that Escambia, Santa Rosa, Aleutian, Clay, Flagler, Lake County, Hernando, Pasco, and Pinellas have already made their statement and ruling that we're going to be mask optional next year. So I'm just wanting to know why we're hesitating to not go ahead and make that statement to our community. Now, I think if your statement is true, that Mr. Hyde recognizes that this is an okay decision. I don't know if anybody else has reached out to Mr. Hyde. I know I have as well. And so I appreciate that perspective. I think it is important to definitely keep him involved in the conversation for sure. But I want us to go back a year on this process too. The person that was sitting in this seat here said that thousands of people were going to die. Thousands of our students were going to die, right? And we're going to open up the schools 2 weeks. Thousands of people are going to walk into our school systems with COVID. That did not take place. Now, in all of this and all that fear that you guys had to listen to, we made good decisions. And we have to recognize that. John Hill, thank you for your leadership, right? Our kids are safe. Our kids are safe. When I look at the data, Blake, 3.5% cases total over the year. Carlton Palmer, 1.1% active cases. Cleveland Court, 1.8% total cases. This is over since we started reporting. This is minimal. Now, I'm not undermining the complexity of this disease because it is serious. In this issue, we should not undermine that. But I think there's an opportunity here to make a decision. And I'll just leave it at that for right now.
Mr. Allen, so my question is, clearly, are you wanting to put this as an item for a vote tonight? But what I'm not sure what you're asking, in other words, there's two things in my mind. One is is at the end of school, after the 4th. Second, as you brought up, is summer school. And third is the fall.
Right.
And I don't know that we're ready really for the fall. I think that's going to come out, but I think it's going to just come out of policy as we move forward, that it'll be, I really believe it'll be mask optional come the fall. I mean, I think that's going to be integrated into our code of conduct and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's coming naturally, but I wanted to be sure that we addressed the immediate future. So it's up to you and the board consensus as to what we want to do tonight, if anything, or wait till the 8th.
Yeah, so
Yes,
I'll,
sir.
I'll continue my thoughts here. You know, there's been press on this, obviously, and I think there's been loose terminology attached to a lot of things going around. And I would say that truth is very fragmented at this point, right? I did not call for an emergency meeting. I just want to clarify and get that out there as well. I did ask for a special meeting. I thought that was important. And I did not address and make any promises in regards to what's happening. I'm here to listen. So I think there's still other board members that would like to speak to this, and I recognize the complexity of this issue. So I'll leave it at that for right now at this moment. I would love to hear everybody else's thoughts.
And just for the record, I never received a request for a special meeting. I didn't know anything. I did not know you had done that.
Yeah.
Plus,
And
I was out of
wasn't
town.
sure the process. I just
Sure.
read the policy, and I thought it was important for us to discuss.
To discuss, sure.
Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
yes, I did not receive that, so. All right. Yes,
That's,
Ms.
that's
Miller?
because you were
Yes.
paying attention to the sunshine law.
Well, yes, yes, yes.
Please, no sunshine violation.
Right, no, no,
And
no. I
others,
did not-
others were helping you stay in compliance with the
Stay
sunshine
in
law.
compliance, yes, okay.
I have a question
Thank you.
about summer learning.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me when summer learning starts?
That would be Ms. Jackie.
It's going to start, I believe you have the date for June 9th. Am I correct, Mr. Hill? I believe it's June 9th. And Mr. Hyde is aware of those dates as well, that he wanted to be a part of the discussion prior to, before that starts, so he is aware of those dates as well.
Okay, thank you. So
Thank
summer
you.
indoor learning is June 9th. Athletic activities, which are already, have been stated, mask optional.
Yes,
Could
June
be
7th.
happening anytime. June 7th?
They start June 7th is what I was told. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you for
correct.
clarifying that.
Yes, Ms. Reynolds?
But the masks would be optional for the athletic activity starting June 7th, is that? 'Cause if they're outdoor,
That's the plan that Mr. Talbot has right now with the
Okay.
spring training and all of that.
Perfect. So waiting to have the conversation with Mr. Hyde essentially will be 2 days difference. Is that what I'm hearing? It would be
Right.
making it the 7th, or if we were to do so on the 8th, it could be active immediately.
The 9th.
Okay. I mean, my opinion would be to have the conversation on the 8th and do it at our meeting. Because to me, adding an emergency item to an agenda is if it's emergent and there's a time-sensitive issue, but it doesn't sound, and Wes may be able to give greater clarification, but it doesn't sound like it would meet the time-sensitive requirement.
I'm sorry.
To add it as an emergency item?
I mean, the chair can find cause to add it to the agenda because you do have a compressed timeline. So you could add it to the agenda tonight and you could have a vote. It is legal for you to do so.
Yes. Mrs. Fields?
Because there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not this item was going to be on the agenda for tonight because of conversations about one of the board members wanting to call an emergency meeting and people calling and wanting to know that from me or asking me directly. I told them it would not be on the agenda, to my knowledge, for voting tonight. So I think that we need to make sure that we allow the public to come if they want to and have comment on what we're going to be voting on. We do have some people here today. They would be able to have comments, but there are other people who would probably love to be here as well, but they did not have the understanding that it would be on the agenda for tonight's meeting. So I am encouraging us to allow the public to have input. Please don't put this on the agenda tonight. Let it come on June the 8th, after we've had discussion the early part of the day. I think that is the right thing for us to do.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Fortney?
I agree. I'm concerned that our parents, kids, and staff that may want to do summer school, what message are we sending them that could change? Can somebody help me figure that out?
Ms. Fortney,
Thank you.
what I would add, since Mr. Hyde is asking, because he's going to be the one responsible for the implementation and everything going forward, and he's asking to be a part of that conversation, the messaging that we can send out to our parents is that when it comes to the mask, we would get that information out to them as soon as possible. There could be a change for summer, and it could become voluntary at that point. And I would get with him on how he would like to have that message, so we make sure it gets out there correctly. I think at this point, if you're going to make that decision, we just have to send that message out that it could change, so they know that it could become voluntary for summer or optional.
Option, yeah. Option. Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Anyone else? Okay, so bringing it back. So do we have consensus then to wait until the June 8th? That's what I'm hearing. Okay, so let me see a raise of hands for consensus to wait to have a workshop with Mr. Hyde on June 8th and then bring it to a vote on that evening. Who is in favor of waiting till June 8th? Raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
I mean,
Mr. Allen, go ahead.
I think we've had discussions with Mr. Hyde already. I'm trying to understand what are we missing from the puzzle, right? I think there's a lot of documentation, a lot of substantiation around this.
What would be missing, I think,
Yeah.
would be the opposing viewpoint that did not see it on an agenda today. So, and I don't know how vocal the opposing viewpoint will be, but if you put it on an agenda, if you schedule it on an agenda, that gives everyone who would like to speak to it the opportunity to come, which is the purpose of having an agenda published in advance. The law allows you the flexibility to add something for good cause. You could add it, it is legal to do so. But the better form, I think, by all lights, would be to place it on an agenda when the public at large had noticed that it was going to be a vote and could come and express.
Ms. Miller?
No, I'm still listening. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
So my question is to Wes. With an MOU with our teachers and staff and support staff and everybody that takes to get the school going, if it expires on June 30th, that will be plenty of time for us to plan for alternate or voluntary masks for the fall. How will that change if we talk about summer learning?
Well, I do not believe the MOU expires on June 30th. By its plain language, it says it expires at the end of the spring semester unless the emergency order from DOE is extended, but in no case would it last past June 30th.
Okay.
So by its language, it appears to me that the MOU expires at the end of the spring semester because the emergency order was never extended.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I think you have a consensus that people do not want mandated masks in the fall, and that's going to be what we talk about. What we're going to discuss now is what summer learning and those programs look like if they're occurring indoors.
Correct.
So that's where we are
Correct.
to decide on June the 8th what that would look like
Correct.
indoors. But no one's intending to say on June the 4th or whatever, the night of our meeting, by the way, we're pushing this into the fall.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and if that's
is-
the correct
is.
consensus of the board,
Yes.
definitely. I appreciate that.
Yes, that's exactly, she summed it up beautifully. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Absolutely. And really, when you talk about voting on something tonight for the end of June 4th, at the end of school, versus the Tuesday, the 8th, we're talking basically 2 days, as Ms. Reynolds pointed out. I think we're splitting hairs because school is out the 4th. And going forward, then we'll have some discussion with Superintendent Hyde as far as how he would like to proceed, but I think he's pretty much in line with what I'm hearing today. And I know some of us chatted with him in preparation for today. So I think we move forward. We put it on the agenda, Madam Superintendent and Ms. Wendy, for work session again, and then put a vote on there for that night, and then we'll go forward with that, because I think it's twofold. It's for the summer learning, and it's for the fall. Truly, but I really believe in the fall, it's going to be 100% mask optional, based on the trajectory of what I'm seeing in other districts, as well as the COVID numbers. But again, I don't have a crystal ball either. So, Ms. Reynolds?
I just have a question for Ms. Jackie, if you don't mind. As far as advertising to teachers that are teaching summer learning, are we making sure that they'll know that it very likely could be mask optional?
We will make sure they know that.
Okay.
I'll get with Ms. Yoakum is in the room today, and I'll get with Ms. Porteous, and we'll make sure that the messaging is of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think, and let me just add, in a lot of the discussions, there's words that are repeal the mask. I really believe we need to be very specific that it's going to be mask optional. There are people who may be immunocompromised and want to continue to wear because they're teaching in a classroom, and I fully 100% respect that. I don't think we say, repeal it or whatever those words are. It needs to be a mask optional so that someone who wants to can wear a mask. And then children as well as adults. I just think that's where we need to go forward, because everybody's journey is so very different and needs to be respected. And I think that's where we go into the discussions on June the 8th, board members. Are we all good with consensus then to wait till June 8th to have our discussion with Mr. Hyde and then make some decisions that evening going forward? Mr. Allen, are you good?
I'm good. Definitely in favor of us being mask optional
Right.
in the fall.
Okay, wonderful. Any other comments? Okay.
I
Yes,
just have
ma'am.
one, because I'm not going to say anything at the meeting tonight. To all these folks out here, some of which I know personally, I want to thank you for sending the cordial emails. I appreciate that. I tried to answer every one of them, but I have to let you know that I had just as many opposite views as I answered emails. And I did a little math, and it came down to 0.00471% of our 105,000 kids, and that's what those emails represented. And I won't even go into how many it represented that I get every day, but I do want to thank you, because as I said, I am listening, which is why I brought up the outside. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Okay, and I too want to thank everybody that took the time to come here. I hope you understand the perspective that you heard today. There's a lot of information, and we appreciate you, and especially the young lady that brought the little children. I mean, it always near and dear to my heart to see our kids involved in this process, and I hope they got an opportunity to learn. And I thank you for being so kind, sending, like Ms. Fortney said, the emails, and letting us know how you feel, but doing it in a kind and respectful way. So we appreciate your time and coming out here this afternoon, because I know you have places to be and things to do, so thank you. At this time, board members, we would move on to our next item, correct, Madam Superintendent?
You're correct.
Okay, it's our executive assistant job description. So let me kind of set the stage what has transpired, as we know that our executive assistant has left us. And in the interim, for that first week, Miss Linda has worked for us, and then it was time to move her into the position of acting executive assistant as of that Monday, what was that Monday? Monday, May 1st, 2nd? And so I made the decision to move her into acting because she went from part-time as secretary, executive secretary, to full-time executive assistant. until we have the opportunity to meet today, because some of you had some changes you wanted to make to the job description. And so Linda's been acting in that capacity. So a couple things I want to talk about today. Dedra's been very kind and working with me to get this taken care of. I know some of you have information and you have questions about the job description. I would like us to talk about it today. Dedra's going to be doing it in live time here and making the changes so that hopefully we can come to consensus today on the job description so that it can be posted. And it's normally out there, I think it's for 10 days to 2 weeks, something like that. And then once the applications come in, she would screen them for us based on the qualifications that are listed. And then I would like to request that we have a little tiny board committee. I know it's open to sunshine, but that's fine, to meet and determine who our next executive assistant would be. So I would like to ask you either now or we can do it at the end of the discussion for a couple volunteers so that we can put a little committee together to do this. So we can do that at the end of the meeting. I just wanted to let you know kind of where we're headed. So at this point, Ms. Porteous, I appreciate you and your time that you've spent with me, and you've been very gracious and so helpful in this process, and I thank you for that. So before I forget, so Linda is now the acting executive assistant until such time as the new person, or the position, I should say, is filled. So I'll leave it at that. And I do believe, and I need to be open, that Linda has told me, and maybe some of you, that she plans to apply for the position as well. Just trying to be transparent as we move forward. So, Ms. Porteous, if you'd like to start. Ms. Fields?
I have a question for Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, I'm trying to understand who has the authority to make someone an interim or an acting position on the board? Is that a chair decision, or is that a decision that should be made by the entire board?
That is something that is not addressed anywhere in policy, to my knowledge. It is something that is developed organically, not only on the board side, but on the regular district side as well. We've created this acting thing, and it's never been clear to me what it means. In this instance, I assume that it means more hours moving in there, and it's logical that if you have one person who can work more hours and do the job, whether you call them acting or not, that's a logical move, and I don't think would implicate any policy. But I've never seen, and Ms. Porteous may be aware of something that I'm not. I've never seen any policy or directive that creates the position of acting.
So in the lead plan, in our guidelines for personnel actions, we have something that is called an acting or interim position. What happens is when a position is vacated, Mrs. Byrd or the superintendent at that time has the ability to make someone that meets the qualifications of the position acting. It is a separate position than the vacant position, so as to not confuse the positions. And for us, it allows us to, one, pay the person for doing the duties of the original vacated position. I don't know if that helps, Wes, or Mr. Bridges. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that's in a handbook.
It's in our lead plan, yes.
In
The lead plan.
lead plan.
And I will say to you, Ms. Fields, when I reached out to Mrs. Byrd and Mrs. Porteous as to how to move forward, that was the advice that I was given.
Thank you for
Yes, ma'am.
clarifying that.
Yes, ma'am.
My other question is, my understanding is that the board has 3 positions that is budgeted to be overseen by the board office, and that would be the superintendent, the internal auditor, and the school board attorney. And all the other positions fall under the umbrella of the superintendent of schools. And the superintendent of schools, since forever, have always given us 1.5 position, my understanding. So, Mr. Bridges, are you aware of that? Do you know how the state statute works? Can you answer that for us? Because I think that needs to be clarified.
The statute specifically provides for the board to hire counsel and an internal auditor. There is no mention of any other position. Your policy manual, however, indicates that it says that the board may also hire an administrative assistant. When this question came up, it happened that Andrea Messina was in the room, and she said, I thought that position belonged to the superintendent. And I told her, in Polk, we have a policy, and I reached out to the other districts to see, and predictably enough, there's once again a mixed bag. We have districts where the board's administrative assistant is selected by the superintendent, usually with input of the board, and belongs to the superintendent of schools. At the far extreme, we have Broward County, which operates almost like a legislative office, and every board member has their own assistant that they hire. So, out of all the audits we've ever had, we've never had a finding saying that it's inappropriate. And so by policy, we have the position in Polk County under the school board.
So it's done different ways by different school districts, is what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. It all over the place. Well, I shouldn't say all over the place. Usually it's one or the other. It's either the board hires and the administrative assistant belongs to the board, or the superintendent hires with the input from the board and the position belongs to the superintendent but is assigned to the board office.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Fields. Ms. Porteous, would you lead us through this discussion?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I provided each of you in both email and hard copy today job descriptions. I think one of the board, or not I think, I apologize. One of the board members did ask for job descriptions for the same or similar position from other school districts, particularly large school districts. So that is what you have in front of you. Also, I provided you with the actual job description of the executive assistant for the school board via email, and then that is what is also projected on the screen. Just for clarification, this job description has not been updated since 2013, and so if you look at the job description, it is a bit outdated, and so I believe that it will be good for us to just kind of walk through what you all believe would be helpful for this position. So if we just look at education, experience, if we start at actually knowledge, skills, and abilities, that's the top paragraph right here. If you all can look at the screen, I'll make it larger. Can everyone see that? Is that too big? If you look at knowledge, skills, and abilities, obviously considerable knowledge of the operations and functions of the school system, considerable knowledge of business, English, creative writing, and various computer software programs, considerable knowledge of Florida statutes and the School Board of Education administrative rules and school board policies, ability to compose effective correspondence and accurate minutes, ability to deal with non-routine matters with little or no supervision, ability to assemble and organize data, and to prepare composite reports from such data, ability to meet and deal with the public in an effective and courteous manner, bilingual or biliterate preferred. Do we have any changes based on what I've provided to you with the other job descriptions? Would we like to change that at all? It's my recommendation, actually, if you look at the School Board of Hillsborough County, the Senior Administrative Secretary position.
The redo on 2020, Trevor, or the 2013?
I'm sorry?
The 2020 version or the 2013?
It's 2018, revised 2018. It's at the top. Hillsborough County is in the top left. In the middle, it says Secretary, Senior Administrative. If you look at, everyone has it?
Yes.
It was probably the fifth one.
Mm-hmm.
There are two from Hillsborough, but this is the one that I'm focusing on. Again, the Senior Administrative Secretary position. You found it, Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay. And so if you look at that, I personally thought that this was a good, very specific duties in terms of job duties and responsibilities. In terms of what will happen for those, for the position in the school board office.
Except
ma'am.
for the manager's chief or deputy superintendent calendar. That-
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, that would mean, maintains school
School
board
board.
members' calendar, arranges meetings for the school board with various individual group, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, if that could be replaced, that would be the only thing. Pardon?
There's 7 of us.
Yes, right.
But I'm more than happy to, if you all have any other suggestions. Yes, I'm sorry.
One of the things that has come up a few times in the past couple of years is the keeping of the minutes. And I believe that used to live at one point in the board office, and it, in recent years, was transitioned to the superintendent's office. I tend to believe that is something that should live within the board office. I don't know what my colleagues' opinions would be on that, but I think that that's something that, if it's going to live in the board office, that that's something that should be codified in the job description.
So under knowledge, skills, and abilities, we can put extensive knowledge of minute taking.
Well, it has it in there. Hold on, it's in there, it's not specified what minutes. Hold on, I
It
just
is-
saw it. Hang on.
Right, it's in the Hills, it's the 4th bullet point. On the
In Hillsborough's.
senior administrative.
Yes, there we go.
That's something, as,
Yes.
in a larger discussion, as we're looking at all of these, that's something that I feel like we should make sure is in whatever version we end up with, if that makes sense.
Ms. Fortney?
Along what Sarah Beth just said, I tend to agree that it needs to be spelled out. But isn't the work session for the superintendent
Correct.
and the
Our
staff
meeting. Mm-hmm,
to enlighten us?
yes,
And then the actual board meeting,
is ours.
I'm just asking for clarification.
good.
Because I, like Mr. Allen, try to listen.
So on that bullet 4, takes and transcribes minutes of the board meetings and take workshops out, because that is superintendent's. Does that make sense? Please weigh in.
That is correct.
So do we want to make that change? Is everybody good with that? So we would scratch out the word workshops, take minutes of board meetings, recognition, student forums, et cetera, but not workshops. And do we need to put that in there, like in parentheses, workshops, superintendents, executive secretary, or something? So,
I don't think it needs to be clarified in because this is pertaining to the board office.
oh, board office, okay, okay.
Workshops.
Yeah,
Would student forums need to be on there?
Only if you all had, Master, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If you had individuals as board members and you had different forms, you might want to put something of clarification or any other forms. You know, like when you have, what do you call the sessions that sometimes you have where you go out and meet the community and stuff like that, and you need those minutes, so you can follow back up on them. So,
Get rid of the word student, right, just forum?
yeah, I'll take out some.
Ms. Porteous? Oh, I
I'm doing it
can't-
real time,
I can't
so-
see that. Okay. Sorry.
As you're making the suggestions.
Yes.
So right now it reads, takes and transcribes minutes of board meetings, workshops, recognitions, forums, and miscellaneous meetings.
No workshops.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No workshops.
I apologize. Mrs. Cunningham. Ms. Miller.
Yes, Ms. Reynolds.
just to clarify, for example, for superintendent search, we had several work sessions that were ours. They weren't, even though they were called
Right.
work sessions, would those fall under miscellaneous meetings?
Yes,
Okay,
that's a great question.
just trying to avoid
I
future
know,
confusion.
I understand. Yeah, no, this is great. Yes, Ms. Miller?
Since we've had COVID, this has been a time we haven't had to use this one, but the thing I struggled with, and I don't know if it was clearly defined, as a new board member, events and things that we were doing, to get, like, is that something that this person would be in charge of communicating with board members, or is that going to be directly from PR? Because in the past, it's been a little bit confusing, and I would show to events and didn't know where I was going or what I was doing or if I was going to speak or be on stage, and it made it very difficult. And then when I asked, it was different departments were going to be in charge of telling me that.
So I've worked in another school district, Miami-Dade, it was large, but it
Right.
generally came from the school board assistant.
Correct.
So that would be part of
Yes.
the
Position.
duties.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I appreciate it. Just, I need one direction.
Well, and I think somewhere there where we did calendars and all, it probably should say and events, because that used to be the position, that used to be the job of the executive assistant, always. And also making sure, quite frankly, that one person out of 7 could attend these thousands of events throughout the
Oh, that's a
district.
good- that's a
Because
good-
that's really near and dear to my, I used to say, if you can't get someone else, let me know, and I'll try to make it, always, so that somebody represents us, but that is the job of this position.
And I think that's important because the district is very large, and I would
Yes.
try to add the calendar of my municipalities. But there would be if we're going to make improvements on how we connect with the community and be more involved with the community, and it's hard to do with 7 of us, but this person would be responsible for, here's the county's calendar of things that are happening with county government. You should probably be aware of these things in case you want to participate.
Exactly.
Instead of me trying to find 17 different calendars. It would be helpful on the public relations side of our job to have someone coordinating available events for us to attend.
And that was the reason for there used to be a big calendar in our office. It erased a whiteboard where she used to write who's going to which thing. So at a glance, if you walked in one day, you could say, oh, okay, they're all going, this one's not being covered, who can cover
You
it?
mean like the school does?
Yes. Yes.
I'd actually like to direct your attention to the screen above it, or to the screen. It says essential functions of the job. And so these are the current essential functions. Acts as a liaison between the school board members and district administration, provides background information on previous school board actions, duties, obligations, and legal responsibilities, state laws and school board policies, researches matters brought before the school board, researches and provides information to staff on school board actions, follows up on actions approved by the school board, assists the school board in maintaining a good working relationship and rapport with the community, school-based personnel, and the news media, attends all meetings and work sessions scheduled by the school board. Also, supervises daily activities and evaluates the school board executive secretary, that's the part-time position,
Yes.
coordinates the work of staff to ensure the efficient and timely completion of assignments, coordinates meetings, conferences, forums, appointments, and travel arrangements for each school board member, independently analyzes reports and agenda material sent to the school board members to assist them in preparing for the school board meetings, develops yearly department budget with the school board chair and manages its implementation throughout the year, processes all incoming mail for all school board members to assure handling and response on a timely basis, assistant to the school board policy committee, maintains a tickler file and daily calendar for each school board member, screens telephone calls and refers callers to proper administrative staff, coordinates payroll and other related activities for the school board and staff, implements all purchase orders, vouchers, travel expense reports, and requisitions for the school board. So that's currently what's there. We're going to add takes and transcribes minutes of school board meetings, recognitions, forms, and miscellaneous meetings.
And my question is, what about, and the news media? I'm not sure that would fall in that person's preview. That's the only thing on here that I personally am not really, I think we should, all news-related information should be sent out through our public relations, strategic partnership, whatever the department's called.
Is that from them wanting to make the board office a contact for that? I'm not sure either.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, ma'am.
My suggestion would be if it's going to deal with the media, I would put one point of contact and let that be your PR division and let them notify you prior to anything going out, so that you have that one voice.
Thank you. Right, exactly. So if you could just pull that out of that, the last sentence in the first paragraph, and just end with, "and school-based personnel," period.
Another question, Madam Chair. And
Yes,
this might-
ma'am.
And
Go
I
ahead.
really would like to rely on the veteran members who were here. I mean, I remember the days as a community member of how the board office worked. If we could rely on them to help define some of this, I think it would be helpful for whoever's in that position, because it may have been different for at one time than it currently is. And things are dated, like a tickler file originally was a paper file from 100 years ago.
Right.
I don't know if you want to include that, or, I mean, I had to look it up.
Really?
It's
Oh,
an
no.
old- I mean, I remember it from, in the 80s, like, so, but it's been around before that. So we may need to change what that sounds like, so we've updated the position.
Sure.
So
Before
actually,
computers, I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
That'll-
Can you make a suggestion on how we could reword that?
sure, actually, if
In
I'd
the,
like,
in the HR context, tickler is really not a very good word.
agreed, Wes, thank you so much. Actually, I'd like to direct your attention to the School Board of Broward County job description, the Executive Secretary for the Office of School Board Members. It's the last one that was in your packet. Theirs was revised recently.
It says 07.
Oh, no, maybe not. Sorry.
Well, they just did the pay grade in '07.
Okay. I did like, though, keep calendar, number 7, keep calendar, set up appointments, and arrange school board, or school meetings for school board member.
I
Where's
think
the
if you
tickler
just get
file?
rid of the word tickler file and just put maintains daily
Calendar.
calendar for each school board member, period.
Okay.
That's what you're saying.
Right.
That if we have to be someplace at a certain time, that we get notified because they maintain that calendar. Is that correct? If you just remove
Let me find it.
maintains,
Maintains, okay.
just get rid of the word tickler file and the word and.
You could also say.
Yes.
Keep board members abreast of important events or something like that.
Sure, yep,
And maintain the daily calendar.
perfect.
So maintains a daily calendar, and, Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
Fields?
I said keep board members abreast of upcoming events.
Okay.
Can we add "and deadlines"?
Yeah, and I would say informed instead of abreast,
Whatever.
because of Wes's comment earlier.
And
They didn't want
deadlines,
abreast, they
Mrs.
wanted
Reynolds?
another word instead of abreast.
Or informed, keep,
So I have keep board members abreast of upcoming events and deadlines.
and, let's see,
Their availability, maybe?
Depending upon availability.
right, and daily calendar for each board member, somewhere in there.
I like sitting like that.
And then maintains a daily calendar for each school board member as well.
I think that needs to remain in there. Mhm.
Are there any other changes that you all would like to make to this section? Do we want something, Orange County has response to internal and external customers in a timely, accurate, courteous, and empathetic manner?
That's great.
That's a great
That's
description.
a great,
I love
great
that, yeah.
comment.
Okay.
Or a great description, yes.
I'll just drop it down
Ms.
here.
Reynolds?
Bullet point number 1 from the Hillsborough County performs a variety of specialized secretary tasks requiring high degree of maturity, tact, judgment. But the part I really liked was ability to maintain the confidential nature of sensitive information.
Okay.
And I don't believe there's anything that specifies the confidentiality of
Okay, so let me get
Some of
actually
our-
both of those.
feelings.
I'll change it to PCPS here. So in orange, it reads, response to internal and external customers in a timely, accurate, courteous, and empathetic manner, representing PCPS in a positive light.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
And then also, Mrs. Reynolds, I will add senior administrative. First bullet here, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other changes there? And this is again to the essential functions of the job. So this is what the position or the person in that position will do on a daily basis. Yes, ma'am.
I have, and this is more of a formatting question. Is there a reason that we put ours in paragraphs as opposed to bullet points like several of the other districts do?
No,
Could we put ours in bullet points?
we will certainly.
These are so much easier to look at than the ones that are in paragraphs.
So I think the job descriptions were changed in, the format was changed, I want to say in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, to include the paragraphs.
Don't our other job descriptions come bullet pointed?
Some of them, we're changing them slowly.
Right.
So as we amend them,
That'd be
we change
great
them.
to have bullet points
Yes,
instead of
will do.
paragraphs.
Okay. Here, under education experience and/or certification and license requirements, we have currently graduation from high school or completion of GED, supplemented by courses in business administration, computer programs, considerable experience in responsible administrative secretarial position, or an equivalent combination of training and experience. One of the things you'll notice is that we don't have a specific amount of years here. So usually in other districts, as you can see from the other job descriptions, most of them have about 5 years on average. Some of them go as high as 8 years. Some of them, most of them are 5 years, at least 5 years within a secretarial job role. That could be either within the district or outside of the district. So is that something that we want to put on there, or do you like how it is right now?
I think we need to put some length of time.
Yeah.
And my question is, what is the starting salary for this position? Is it
40.
40,000?
42,
Okay,
40,
I couldn't remember, I know it was in
I
the 40s.
thought it was 42. I emailed it to you all of you.
Definitely, I think that there needs to be a minimum requirement of experience.
Okay.
That's just my
Do-
opinion on the matter.
So my recommendation would be a 5-year minimum requirement of secretarial experience. If you look at,
Or office,
I'm sorry,
running an office, maybe, or,
okay,
I don't want to be too descriptive, because
Right.
in this mass of an organization, someone could submit somebody could submit interest and automatically be declined if it doesn't meet
Correct.
the requirements.
that is
Yeah.
true. So what happens is we screen for minimum qualifications. That's what Mrs. Cunningham talked about earlier. So let's say someone only has 3 years of minimum qualifications, meaning they would have 3 years of experience as a secretary at Publix. They would not meet our minimum qualifications if we put 5 years there. So that's something to think about as a board.
What do you recommend for that? I mean, 5 years to me is usually people move up and out of these positions. I don't know that they've been,
So based on my experience, I would say a lot of our principal secretaries in our secretarial unit, they tend to stay in the unit.
Okay.
Quite honestly, with a position of this caliber, when we were hiring for Mrs. Bird's executive position, I'm almost certain it says 5 years for that JD as well. And the reason being is because we are a large organization. You want people in these positions that know, one, our organization, but then two, know how to find the resources needed. Because a large part of that is screening phone calls for you all, making sure that calls are routed appropriately, et cetera. And it takes a while to really get to know our organization. So we could do maybe 3 to 5 years if you'd like.
that might give us some cut, 3 to 5.
3 to 5
Minimum
years.
3 up to 5, I don't know.
I would just say 3, a minimum of 3 years experience
Okay.
if you want to do 3 years.
3 years.
But I know that Mrs. Bird's position, I'm almost certain that for the executive position that Mrs. Winchester is in, it's 5 years. And I think even for cabinet level secretarial positions,
That's the
it's
entire
5 years as
district,
well.
Not 7 board members.
Right, that's where I
I'm
don't
sorry,
want to,
I couldn't hear you.
That's the entire district, not 7 board members.
Correct.
right.
Yeah.
I just don't want to lose an opportunity for someone to come in because they have a different skill set and they can learn that piece of it because of a number of years in a specific job. I don't know. I'm not sure.
So if you look at Palm Beach says a minimum of 5 years of progressively responsible and highly accountable experience in providing all manner of administrative support, including delegated administrative duties on behalf of management as directed. So that's something we can play with. And hearing your concern about the 5, if you want to reduce it to 3 or 2, or if you don't even want a number.
I've never seen a job description where it wasn't a number.
I'm sorry,
I've never seen a job description where it has not been a number.
ours currently is.
I'm just saying, I was surprised when I saw this.
Well,
Right.
beginning teacher,
there was no
right,
minimum.
would have- I mean, it's,
In an
The
office,
pay.
in an office, I should have clarified that, in an office position.
okay, yeah, okay. I was like, okay.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yeah, I tend to believe that we don't want someone this is their first time being a secretary. I think that working for 7 elected officials is probably not somewhere where you want to have training ground for someone who's never been a secretary before. So I feel comfortable making it 3 to 5 years. But I did want to ask for this, and I know it's been several years, so do you know how many applications we received for Superintendent Byrd that met those minimum qualifications? I mean, I don't need she had 3 to choose from, you had 60 to choose from, just,
We interviewed,
I can't remember how many we interviewed. And I had changed the job description to include some of this information in there because it was very vague for that office. But I think we ended up interviewing probably about 5 or 6 candidates.
I think we interviewed 5 or 6,
5 or
and I
6
want to
candidates.
say we screened it from, we got a lot of
There's a
candidates.
lot of candidates.
Probably 20 plus.
that was really
Okay.
my question, is
Okay.
this going to limit us to 3 candidates to choose from, or do we think we'll probably
No.
get still 15 to
If-
20 at least?
If I could make a suggestion, just from sitting in a seat and watching in another large district as well, I would at least say you need 3. These are positions, a lot of times, they have to hit the ground because you're not there all the time. They got to be able to be very independent and be able to take direction from 7 people going out, and I would not go less than 3. I would
So-
not.
We want to go 3 to 5 then? Mr. Allen?
Yeah, 3 to 5 sounds good. I was looking at the 4th one that you gave us.
Which one is it?
District?
It does not,
The one that
it just
doesn't
says
say? administrative
administrative assistant, school board. I think it's the 4th one.
Duval.
Was it Duval?
It's Duval,
Yeah.
they didn't print it, yep.
Where's that?
That statement, it says 5 years of progressively responsible experience, performing confidential. I like that, progressively.
That is very good language.
It is.
One other thing to consider is, when you've got a minimum, it really ought to be one figure and not a range for a minimum.
Right.
The minimum should, it ought to be, it's either 3 or it's 5. You can also say required 3, desired 5. But when you have a minimum, it needs to be a number.
I was going to say that, thank you,
One number.
Wes. I appreciate it.
So can you,
So if we would look at if we would direct our attention to the job description that says Administrative Assistant School Board, it does not have another title at the top. That's from Duval Public Schools.
yes.
It's a one-pager. It just says Administrative Assistant School Board
Yes.
at the very top. So Dr. Allen, suggested the language that, under open requirements, 5 years of progressively responsible experience performing confidential and advanced level clerical office functions, including delegated administrative duties. From what I'm hearing is that we like that language, yes?
Yes. Isn't that what you read earlier?
No, I read another
No,
one,
you
but
read a
it's similar.
different one. Okay.
And then what I'm also hearing is preferred 3. I'm sorry, minimum 3, preferred 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's frequently how you see it. You'll have, in the requirements, it'll say minimum of, and then in desired qualifications, you may have a higher number.
I would say minimum and preferred. We don't necessarily use desired in our job descriptions. We use preferred. So I would say preferred.
I like that.
Preferred 5 with that language. If you direct your attention to the rest of that paragraph, it says office managerial experience at a school or district level preferred. How do you all feel about that?
Yes.
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't require that because there's so many opportunities in other settings to get that kind of experience.
But I do
wouldn't
think that-
require it government, you know what I mean?
I do think that knowing the district is a benefit to someone coming into this role.
You mean like actually where the schools are located,
Right.
Sarah Beth? And- Yeah.
Who the superintendent is.
Yeah.
Yep, they need to know where that FFA place is,
Yeah.
for
Right,
sure.
right?
It's way out there.
Okay. And I'll steal that language as well. Okay. Are there any other changes to this education experience and/or certification license requirement?
No, ma'am?
Okay. I think that does it. Is there anything else that you all would like to add and/or address?
The last sentence, office managerial experience at a school enter
Oh,
or at a district level preferred, and that's on the job description too. What is that, a school enter?
I don't know. That was in the original job description from Duval, so we'll change it.
That was what you copied and pasted?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
Okay, because I don't see it in here.
Yes.
So, okay.
On the job description.
I'm going to I'm going to recommend that we remove this language, considerable experience in a responsible administrative secretarial position, because we cover that in the next paragraph, I'm sorry, in the next sentence that we just added, the minimum of 3, preferred 5 years of progressively responsible experience. So I would just say secretarial or administrative experience here. Can't spell. Any other changes?
Any other comments then? Ms. Reynolds?
I just have a question on timeline as far as when will it be posted? When is this coming before us?
I can post it as soon as tomorrow.
Right.
I'll make the changes. I'll post it tomorrow. And after we post it, it will be up for 10 working days, which is about 2 weeks in terms of weekends, et cetera. From there, we will screen it. We being HR will screen it to make sure that the person meets the minimum qualifications. And then we'll provide the packet of information to you all to then set up interviews and go from there. and you all drive the timeline at that point.
Perfect, thank you.
And what I'd like to do, obviously, is, once we get the selected, screened applicants back to us, which you can, Ms. Porteous, are you able to send those to all 7?
Yes.
Anybody had, okay, thank you if you do that. And then once that's done, then I was going to try to ask a few of you if you would be on the interview and selection committee. And so do I have any volunteers? 1, 2, 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would like 2 females and a man, if I
Yeah,
could.
love to, thank you.
So, Ms. Fields, Ms. Miller, and Mr. Allen, or Dr. Allen, would that be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a position that all 7 of us should be involved in selecting. I would prefer not to leave it up to the committee. I'd like for all 7 of us to be able to be involved.
Okay.
Maybe the committee could bring recommendations to the board for discussion,
Great.
and that way everybody will be involved.
That's
Okay.
perfect.
I'm hesitant for us to hire someone that's
I agree with
without
you.
getting to interview them.
That's fine.
So,
You can
yeah.
join the group. I understand. That's fine. If you-
And one request is whenever the mini committee schedules.
Yes.
Let
Public
me
meetings.
know so
Yes,
that we
yes,
can
yes.
notice it. It will need to be
Yes.
open.
I promise you
So-
will be,
so
you
that-
will be
So that Ms.
notified.
Moore can come visit.
They will keep me in the loop. So we have Dr. Allen, Mrs. Miller, Ms. Reynolds, and Mrs. Fields.
Right.
Are you okay stepping back and letting them do
I've
that?
never had an executive assistant in my life until I got elected, so I am good with whatever the board
Decide.
decides. Any help I was able to get, I was appreciative.
Awesome. Okay, so that's our committee that will interview when the time comes. And then once the committee is done, as Ms. Fields indicated, then you all will present us with the slate of candidates, correct? That's what we're asking. Maybe a top recommendation and an alternate, I don't know, however you come out of that, so that then the board can vote as a whole and hopefully meet the candidates and make that decision. Does that sound like a plan? Kind of like our superintendent, if you will, just in a mini version. Okay, well, I appreciate that.
Just so I'm
Um,
clear, in our
yes.
other positions of this nature, we normally ask for a cover letter and/or a resume in addition to the application in RHS. Is that okay with you all? Do you
Yes,
want the
ma'am.
same information? So you want a cover letter, you want a resume.
Cover letter and a resume.
And the application as well.
And the application, yes, ma'am.
We also ask for references. Do you want the references now or later?
I mean, nobody's going to give you a bad reference, so that's up to how you all feel. But,
It's hit or miss sometimes.
Right.
So I won't screen them out if they don't have references. If they do, then you'll receive that information in the packet that we provide to you.
because, a lot of time on resumes, it says we'll provide references upon request or something. And if they make it to the whatever, the top 2, let's say, maybe, then at that point, maybe we would request it. That's up to the committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a lot of work. Thank you for being so kind to set that up today and be able to do this while we're all sitting here, so we can get comments from everybody.
Certainly.
Okay. Moving forward is our agenda review. Okay, starting with the consent agenda, going from the first page, items in Area G, consent agenda, items 1 through 9. Do we have any questions?
I do.
Mrs. Miller, go ahead.
I'm trying to find the number. I apologize.
It's okay.
You're quick on that, Chairman Cunningham. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Connected to item, I guess this question is connected to item 13.
So that's after 9.
Okay. My first-
Anybody have anything up to 9?
I
It was
do ha-
1 through 9?
I do have something for number 2.
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
Just in general, and I think Mr. Wilson mentioned this, there's 2 things, and I would like to add them to a future work session with Superintendent Hyde in place. The one thing Mr. Wilson mentioned that we've talked several times about dollar amounts in the consent agenda.
Yes.
And the second thing is, and Wendy Dodge was working on this for me, but COVID and session are very busy.
Yes.
I was not here when they increased the amount to 250,000 that is approved without board without board voting, and later on we're given an update on that. Most size districts our size, it's not that high. Hillsborough just went from like very low, maybe 50,000 to 100. And I understand we did it at a time when board meetings were scheduled and so far apart that people couldn't get to us fast enough to get things approved. But as a board member, I would like to have that discussion, work session, just because that's a lot of inquiry from the public on things that come through that we don't have a voting right to. So can we do that at a future
Yes.
work session?
I already have it. Mr. Wilson asked at the last meeting, and we spoke, and it's going to be on the work session for the June 8th.
He has it for the items and consent, but for the superintendent approval, as a new superintendent rolling in, I think it's a good time to talk about that, what board votes will be on. I don't know what it's called, and you will have that, I'm sure, because you have a lot more years' experience in this.
Yes.
But if we can add that, that would be great.
Both. Okay, we'll take
thanks.
care of that, Ms. Miller.
Yes.
Yes,
So
Ms.
on
Dr.
that-
Allen? Uh-huh.
Yeah, on that item in particular.
Yes.
Right, that came to us last meeting. So is that increase of budget, is that determined on whether we get that NFL grant or not?
I'm not sure of the
I'm not
question.
understanding the question.
Yeah.
Yep, so if we look at number 15, if you remember our last meeting, there was a conversation just saying, hey, would we build consensus on sending a grant request to the NFL, right? And then this is it's a matching grant. So my question is, if that grant is not awarded, what's our plan?
You're talking about this is pertaining to actually, what we're looking at is for Mulberry, this one. And then Angela's going to come back to you because we've been looking at that field at Mulberry and different things in that nature. Structurally, there's some issues that are there and some things that will actually have us not to fulfill the needs of all of our programs. So we're prepared, if not, to go back to the sale. I believe they've gone to the committee. I think they have to increase it already, but this is just if we can get the matching, we don't have to go back into our own funds. That's what that's for.
Okay.
It's kind of, we had to get the letter out by the deadline to them that we were even going to be interested in doing that. But we were going to bring this forward anyway for Mulberry. This was coming forward to increase that amount. And that's just for them.
Okay.
Ms. Reynolds?
Mine's on a different number, so.
Okay,
we done
and
with
any
two?
other questions on items 1 through 9?
Mine-
Okay, go ahead, Ms.
Mine's
Reynolds.
on 8, for the Lake Region Senior Agriculture Building. And I'm sorry Angela's not here today because this is probably a question for her. But the contract was canceled due to not being able to meet it under the price, I believe. What, are we looking to go out for a new contract with a different construction management group?
Looking at this, because it was approved for them, and if it was, canceled, they would have to go back out. But I can get
Okay.
you, hopefully Pam will be back, and I can get some clarification. Pam Luce may have that, or Richard Alderman.
Okay.
But, oh.
Oh, he's
yeah.
here.
Oh, there's Richard.
Come on up.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So they
Thank
have
you. I just
construction
wanted to make sure, I get an email about that once a week, so I just want to make sure we're not canceling the ag building.
And for the audience, the response was that we're going out for a bid for a construction management, right, company?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, any other questions 1 through 9? Miss?
No, I'm jumping ahead.
No? Okay. Next, we have items 10 through 23. Ms. Miller?
Number 13, is that emergency authorization, is that a renewal? Or is that something we're implementing at this point, Wes? That might be a you?
That has been in place for some
I
time.
was going to say, yeah, it's every year.
So I'm
Renewal.
sure it's a renewal. The dollar figure is not included, but I don't think that's changing. This is an item that's been done every year.
Okay, so
Yes.
this is an annual,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, we do it each year and just for emergencies.
Because
But
hurricanes
as you-
happen,
right?
Especially for
Yes.
hurricane season, that's what I
Yeah,
was
as
telling
you-
you.
as you pointed out earlier, it all started when we went from 2 board meetings a month to 1.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, anyone else for items 10 through 23?
Yep, I do have
Yes,
one.
Dr. Allen?
And I talked to Ms. Porteous earlier, and I don't know if she's out there, but on number 20 was the recommendation for organizational charts. And I was seeking clarification on chart number 4 as it related to the unfunding of our Senior Director of Communication. And then there was a name change on that title as well. So I just wanted to hear some clarification on that. And
I can speak to that.
awesome.
Again, as you saw the budget earlier with things we were preparing for, so one of the things that we were looking at is that you're going to have a director. We're going to lower that from a senior director to a director position at that point. So you're going to have the same service. We're just changing the title structure in that, and as soon as it's approved, we're going to go out and advertise for that. So that's what we're doing with that one. Some of the positions that we were looking at in our organization and lining up with some of the other ones around our counties as well, not the county, around the state, but changing from a senior director to a director, but you're not going to lose any of the services. Okay. That, if you look, it goes from senior director to coordinator. There's a big gap, no in between there, so we're going to make it from a director, is what we're going to have it as.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that good? Okay. Any other questions? Items 10 through 23. Okay, moving forward to our action agenda. Items, any question on items 1 through 6?
Are we gonna have discussion on 6, now?
Yes, ma'am. I would believe that we should do that now, yes.
Okay.
Okay, Mrs. Fields, go ahead.
All right, so I am not going to be supporting the approval of the contract for Mr. Hyde. I had a conversation with him on yesterday, and I told him why. And the reason why is because since I've been on the board, since 2002, and since we've had an appointed superintendent, the superintendent that's coming in the position has always been at the same level of pay as the one that is leaving. And I understand that Mr. Hyde is not requesting that we pay for his health insurance for his family. I understand that in Illinois, they don't pay taxes and Social Security out of their checks. I understand that. I understand that Mr. Hyde has basically foregone any type of raise for the last 2 years, so has Ms. Byrd. And I believe wholeheartedly in gender equity, and I think that it sends a very poor message in my part of the world to have an incoming male coming in making more than a sitting female who has done an amazing job as superintendent of schools for our district. The evidence of her work and her teamwork is there. I think it would be a slap in the face for us to bring Mr. Hyde in at 2:55 and Ms. Byrd leave out at 2:38. I talked to Mr. Bridges about my concern first, and he explained to me that if we backed out the health insurance coverage that we're paying for Ms. Jackie's family, that the amount of money that we're talking about as an increase for Mr. Hyde would be, I think, $9,000. And that would be
Something like 3.3%.
or like a 3.5% raise or something like that. None of our staff have had a raise, we know that, because of the situation that we're in. I just think it sends a very bad message right now. And I understand that when people come for new positions, they expect to make more than what they're making currently. The other thing is in Illinois, the cost of living is much higher than it is in our area. So because of that, and like I said, I don't have anything against Mr. Hyde. Everybody remembers when we were talking about who we wanted to appoint for the superintendent, I made an appeal that we all should support the majority of the board's choice, and we did that. But in good conscience, I cannot support the contract tonight. So just want to make sure that I explain that, and I will be making the comments again tonight.
Okay, anyone else have comments? Ms. Miller?
I appreciate Ms. Fields' comments, and definitely as someone, as a female who's worked in corporate America, I understand her concerns. I have a couple of questions for Wes. I tried to do the math. I appreciate you offering that up, that it's a 3.3%. The difference would be around $9,000 to $8,000, $9,000 in the insurance.
I think that's how we came up.
So the difference so we're looking at, I don't have the dollar amount with me. My question is, when we've brought people in, we've had appointed for a while, and we appointed within, but the last time we brought someone in, were they given an increase when they arrived here?
I believe that is the case. The first appointed superintendent was Gail McKenzie in 2004. And she came in and her beginning salary was $180,000, which I can't remember what the elected superintendent was making, but I think it was around 140. So we paid, that was number one. After, when Gail retired, we hired her deputy. And at that point, I think her salary had gone up somewhat, but we hired the deputy in at the same salary that Dr. McKenzie ended, which was a considerable raise for her, but she came in at the same salary. When Dr. Nickel left and we brought in Kathy Leroy, she came in at a considerable increase. I think she came in at $225 or thereabouts. When Mrs. Leroy left, we hired her deputy, who came in at the same price, but it was a big raise for the deputy moving into that position. So whenever we've moved the deputy up to that position, the salary has remained the same. But when we brought in somebody, like I said, of course, it's apples to oranges with Dr. McKenzie, because she was coming in after an elected superintendent. But she came in at a considerable raise. Then when Mrs. Leroy came in, she came in at a bump. But in each instance, if we promoted from within, we promoted to the same salary as the predecessor. But when we brought somebody in from outside, the salary went up.
So in the past, and we've only brought in females, this is the first male-appointed
Right.
superintendent.
Correct.
And my recollection is that when Mrs. Byrd came in, I believe the salary was still at $225, and 2 years later, it was moved to $238.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information. I do consider the comments Ms. Fields given, and I understand that, but I think this is something that in the range that we provided, and I have high expectations on dollars and finance issues, and I am trusting him to find those dollars, because we have ASME people showing up tonight and every day looking for raises, and I don't want them to think that money's being diverted away from them. So thank you so much for that. That helped me, but I
Yes,
will
ma'am.
be supporting this contract.
Ms. Fortney?
Mr. Bridges, can you clarify if that superintendent salary comes out of the same pot of money as negotiated salary with our two unions? Is that a yes or no?
I believe the first $225,000 does.
Because I think that's what's, I'm getting the same conversations, I believe, as you, Ms. Fields.
I believe that's the figure. I believe it's the first $225,000 it does. If Jason Pitts is still around, he may have a better, he may have the immediate citation, but I believe it's
I just wanted to
$225,000.
clarify.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyone else? If not, I will speak. I personally feel that we advertise this position in a range, and we are in the middle of the range. I do believe this time, as we did with Dr. McKenzie, we're hiring a sitting superintendent with 7 years' experience, and I believe that salary is reasonable based on the individual, the expectations that we all have, and the value and the experience that he brings to the table. I also thought it was kind of him to say that he would forego the health insurance piece for his family that we're currently paying our current superintendent. So backing those numbers off, in order to take a job and move your family and uproot your entire world, there has to be a salary increase. I don't think any of us would accept that. So, and, you know, the annuity is the same, everything else pretty much is on the table, the car allowance. I mean, I could go on and on, but I do feel that is equitable. It is, as you pointed out, I'm not looking at gender, quite frankly. I think you don't look at gender or color or race or ethnicity. I think you look strictly at the best qualified person for the job. We've hired that person, and now we need to attract them to come to Polk County and stay here so that we can continue to build our wonderful public education system. And I believe Mr. Hyde is the man. We did vote 7-0, and I feel that his compensation should be in exactly where it's at. So I will be supporting this evening.
And Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
I am very, very sensitive to Mrs. Fields' comments, and I appreciated her conversation with me about that. That is always at the forefront of my mind. I will say that I believe my conversations with Mr. Hyde have been very pleasant. Dr. Vogel has also worked as an intermediary in the negotiation and has been very helpful. I do believe that the salary articulated in the contract is the salary that will be required to bring him here.
Correct, yes. I agree. Any other comments? Okay. All right, then we'll move forward. Okay. Any other comments on items 1 through 6? I know we started with 6. Anybody else? Okay, any comments on the public hearing tonight on the policy updates? There are 4 of them, and I checked with Ms. Dodge, and I have put them all as one vote. So they will all be explained, and then I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote for all 4 of them together. Just FYI. Then we have our superintendent's report by the school board attorney, report by our auditor. I don't believe she has a report tonight, and then we'll move into our board member reports. Anything else pertaining to the board meeting tonight? Okay.
Well, I actually have one just quick comment, and Ms. Miller brought this up last board meeting, and I got the brag sheets from all my high schools because I have 7 of them. You may think you have the most, but don't even go to your microphone. Let me finish.
3 minutes.
All right, and I will not be reading those tonight.
Okay.
Considering this is, but I will be June 8th.
Okay, perfect. All right, there's no old business, but we do have new business. The next item for our discussion today is the FSBA committees. So the first one is we have to appoint a board of director for FSBA and an alternate, and then we have to appoint an FSB advocacy committee member and an alternate. Currently, that is being filled by Ms. Sarah Beth Reynolds, and I believe her alternate is Ms. Sarah Fortney. So at this point, I open up the floor for discussion.
I would like to nominate Ms. Fortney to serve as the board of director.
And how do you feel about that, Ms. Fortney?
I need another job. Thank you, Sarah.
You are so welcome.
Okay, board members, are we all in agreement that Ms. Fortney would serve as the board of director for Florida School Boards Association?
Thank you,
By
Sarah.
consensus, awesome. And who would we like as the alternate?
I'll maintain alternate.
You will?
Sure.
What a great gal. Well, thank you, Ms. Miller. Is everybody good with Ms. Miller serving then as the alternate? Okay, so hang on while I make my notes. And next, we have our FSBA Advocacy Committee. How would we like to handle that?
So just so everyone knows, this is the old legislative committee. They, in rule-making 2 years ago, switched it to the advocacy committee, and now there's a subcommittee that's legislative, both state and federal. Currently, I'm on the advocacy committee, but I'm also the only representative on both the federal and the state level. I enjoy that committee and would be happy to continue, but if somebody else is eager and willing and wants to get involved,
Sure.
I would be welcome to giving someone else an opportunity as well.
Awesome.
I nominate Sarah Beth Reynolds instead.
Yay, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney.
And we need an alternate now for that position.
Sure. I mean, I am very interested. There's some upcoming federal legislation, especially in my realm,
Yes.
with IDA, so I would be happy to serve as an alternate, and I'll give all the info to Ms. Sarah Beth, so
Okay.
she can have a voice.
Everybody good with that by consensus? Okay, so we'll bring that forward tonight. Board of Directors, Sarah Fortney. Alternate, Lisa Miller. Advocacy Committee Member, Sarah Beth Reynolds. And alternate, Lisa Miller. So that's what we'll be voting on then this evening. And thank you so much, ladies, for your wonderful volunteering. We really appreciate that.
And Ms. Fortney, your first meeting is June 7th.
And just to be clear,
Congratulations.
Is it in Orlando?
No, it's at the conference that you're already going to be
you're
at.
already there.
Oh, nice.
You're there,
Yeah, you did
all
it on
done.
purpose.
Already there, see there?
And just so you know, the first one, the Board of Director, is, I believe, a one-year term. And Andrea Messina said the Advocacy Committee is a two-year term.
Oh, good to
So,
know.
life
It's a
term,
life term.
okay. Lisa, get ready.
That's how it feels.
What time is that meeting, Sarah Beth? Let me
Yeah,
go-
really.
Please hold, let me find it in my emails, and I'll
Okay.
let you know.
Okay, so I'm going to keep moving because time's coming upon us. So the next thing we have is our board comments. Does anyone have anything for the good of the board for today or anything for this evening?
I do have comments this evening. I'll keep very short in
Okay.
light of, we'll have guests, I'm
Yes,
sure.
we will. I would anticipate quite a few guests. Okay,
I have nothing,
nothing, okay.
except I thank my people for sticking it out with us. Students, parents, everybody.
With the bo- Ms. Byrd, that concludes our portion of the work session today.
Thank you. You have one discipline item, then we have an executive. Do you want, I see Mr. Butler's back there. Do you want to move into discipline now, or do you want to go to executive now?
What's the pleasure of the board?
Discipline's fine.
Let's do discipline. Is there a parent coming? Okay, let's
No
do
parents.
discipline then. Can we adjourn for like, do we need
Yes, so
5
we can
minutes?
clear the
Take a quick
chambers.
break?
Just a quick break. We clear the
Quick break,
chambers,
and then we'll
please.
come do discipline, and then we have executive.